Oh, hey there from Little Hitch and your favorite hitchhiker, Ed Neal. Well, Little Hitch and I would just like to take a moment to wish all the luck to Joe and to Christian. You know why? No, I don't know why. Well, I'll tell you why. Joe and Christian are gonna take a deep dive into the lives of the Sawyer family. Oh no, oh no. Oh yes, oh yes. Christian and Joe are gonna need some luck. Well, of course they'll need some luck. They'll need a lot of luck. And you better line up your head cheese and get it ready because you're gonna need it. Because... Why? Tell them why. Should I tell them why? Yes, tell them why. Okay, I'll tell them why. Because Season 4 begins now!
Poco te fuiste metiendo, poco a poco te vas alejando.
Houston police are puzzled over an outbreak of violence apparently touched off by a suicide. A young man, reportedly angered by a local television blackout of a sports event, jumped from the 10th story window of his apartment. A second man allegedly threatened to leap to his death from the same window, but was restrained by police. Witnesses...
Hello, listeners past, present, and future. This is Haddonfield Radio, where, as always, we bring you the history, legacy, and lore of movies, trailers, and more. We are your basement-dwelling hosts. I'm Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francasio.
And this season on Haddonfield Radio, we will be joining you for a deep dive, fan commentary journey through every single film in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, featuring everybody's favorite hulking horror hero, Leatherface.
Monday, so good to me, yeah. Monday morning, it was all I hoped it would be. Oh, Monday morning, couldn't guarantee that Monday evening you were still here with me.
It was an otherwise ordinary Monday, the sun still climbing to its high daily perch during a sweltering and predictably lingering Texas summer back in August of 1966. And although it was not quite noon, Austin police officer Billy Paul Speed had already wrapped up an early lunch. Officer Speed worked the swing shift from 6 a.m. through 3 p.m., relieving whichever unfortunately green officer was stuck working the dreaded overnight rookie shift, a slow marathon of boredom that he had only just recently graduated out of himself. So after diving face first into a steaming styrofoam to-go box full of smoky Texas barbecue that most likely would have derailed the rest of what should have been a routinely inauspicious afternoon, Officer Speed headed back to his squad car, unaware that fate had much darker plans for the rest of his shift. During the dog days of August, in Texas, the oppressive, ceaseless summer heat begins to wear people down, leaving folks at their worst a little less than polite, even temporarily incorrigible if not downright surly, and maybe just a little bit less inclined to express a modicum of that down-home southwestern charm that was certainly typical of most tried-and-true Tejanos. Yet Officer Billy Paul Speed, a lifelong Texan himself, and an already reputably sensible young officer of the law, knew how to negotiate this fact of local life all too well. In his short tenure as a Texas lawman, Officer Speed had broken up his fair share of bar fights between good old boys and collared more than a few belligerent and abusive soon-to-be ex-husbands, but that was usually the extent of the surly bravado that the high summer heat could kick off. Nothing that normally couldn't be remedied by a night in an air-conditioned drunk tank. Truth be told, by early August 1966, the temperature of the entire world had seemingly reached an uncomfortable boiling point, and it was only getting hotter. The Eastern Communist expansion had been steadily drawing the Western world into a tense Cold War standoff that threatened to lure the entire planet down a slow road to mutually assured oblivion. And so, between the bloody and confusing wars in Southeast Asia, blazing on day after day in crisp Technicolor on living room television screens, as well as the incendiary and rapidly intensifying Vietnam War protests occupying city centers and government buildings, not to mention the rise of countless counterculture factions, acid-inspired left-wing militias, mass layoffs, and of course, high gas prices, it had been a very turbulent summer during an even more tempestuous era of modern history. By the summer of '66, the United States of America found itself in a full-on existential crisis, as corrupting influences began to define the cultural contours of its usually stoic national character, and one after the other, people began to crack from the unyielding pressure as the country started to tear itself apart at the seams. And yet, as far away from the ravages of the war in Vietnam as you could possibly imagine, it was during a routine traffic stop at the corner of 21st Street and Guadalupe in Austin proper, and only moments after finishing his decadent barbecue, that Officer Billy Paul Speed heard the first crackle of seemingly impossible news transmitting through his dashboard CB radio. A lone gunman had reportedly climbed the University of Texas at Austin clock tower, and there were multiple confirmed reports of shots fired and frightening accounts of potential mass casualties. Without 1 second of consideration, let alone hesitation, Officer Billy Paul Speed hurriedly excused the nervous young driver that he had just pulled over and became one of the first Austin police officers to radio back to dispatch that he was immediately en route. It was 11:48 a.m. Earlier that very morning, a 25-year-old former architectural engineering major named Charles Whitman had arrived at the University of Texas at Austin and began to confidently make his way across the meandering Victorian Gothic campus until he finally reached the open-air clock tower breezeway. He was dressed head to toe in the camouflaging costuming of a routine campus maintenance man. Whitman, a rangy, handsome, and usually agreeable young man, had smilingly winked and waved to passing students and staff while entering the Beaux Arts building, which was adjacent to the clock tower itself, without any interference at all from the front desk secretary, who was fastidiously scrawling notes while on a call. Concentrating intently on her work, the pretty and petite administrative assistant simply nodded warmly and smiled, as Charles Whitman, who she must have assumed to be a custodian, calmly pulled out one of his 3 pistols, a Luger .08 9mm, and without emotion or warning, he shot and killed her, just like that, at point-blank range. He then mechanically spun around and placidly gunned down the only other 2 people in the waiting area, a pair of innocent pedestrians who were simply waiting to ask directions. Whitman, aware of the quickly alarming potential of the sound of gunfire, hurried on past his first 3 victims, making lone egress to the nearby elevators which carried him and his quarry all the way up to the 28th floor observation deck, the strategically secure peak atop the locally iconic 307-foot-tall University of Texas at Austin clock tower. After a short ride, Whitman emerged from the elevator and found himself thankfully alone at the very top, and he was dragging behind himself an otherwise ordinary black-wheeled footlocker. Little did the growing throng of students, administrators, and visiting civilians know, as Whitman had passed them only moments before seemingly unnoticed, that heavy black footlocker contained no less than 2 rifles, 2 pistols, and a sawed-off shotgun, as well as a heavy cache of multiple kinds of ammunition, binoculars, a few light snacks, a thermos of hot black coffee, and even a roll of toilet paper. As a former disciplined Eagle Scout himself, Whitman knew instinctually to always be prepared. And prepared he was to rain down murderous hellfire onto everyone and anyone that his incisive aim could locate and ultimately annihilate. Charles Whitman had arrived on the UT Austin campus that day in August of 1966 with only one true and ostensibly final ambition: to murder the world. Whitman knew intrinsically that the nearly impenetrable and easily defendable campus clock tower would capably provide both a symbolic motif to frame his assault, as well as a perfect strategic staging zone with its vertiginous height, protective walling, and 360-degree range of fire. Once he had settled himself and his armaments atop the clock tower's breezy and visually striking perch, Whitman took a deep, calming breath and then gazed down and out over the still quite peaceful mass of anonymous individuals and social groups coming and going, just over the vertical length of a football field directly beneath him, and every single one of them were totally oblivious to the utter lethality about to explode everywhere around them. Whitman carefully opened his footlocker and began removing his weaponry, with his first choice being a 6mm Remington bolt-action long rifle. He adored his Remington, and he had brought along its sibling, his Model 141, as well. He then patiently began to line his sights, controlling his practice breathing while patiently viewing the sufficiency of targets, all while carefully metering his military-grade scope, precisely adjusting the dials to foment the calculus of both wind and range. It was only moments before noon, and Whitman knew that the time to strike was truly and finally upon him, and he did not hesitate for even a second. Hundreds of feet below, dozens upon dozens of enrollees, professors, tourists, and administrators were carrying on as they would on any other summer weekday mid-morning, when everyone in the vicinity began to discern what could only be described as either a series of strangely successive vehicle backfires or perhaps the fizzy popping of oddly timed celebratory fireworks. But by that very moment, for so many of those innocent souls lining the killing floor directly below Whitman's high ground, it was already far too late. Whitman, with practiced military precision, had begun firing down round after horrific round from his powerful rifle, streaking hot lead in every direction with an unmatched ferocity and an extremely unyielding prejudice. This heinous act began a devastating 96-minute killing spree, and as the engaged crowd being fired upon began to frighteningly observe other innocent bystanders being struck and either catastrophically injured or killed instantly by heavy suppressive fire, everyone in range began reacting in predictably chaotic ways, which Whitman had capably planned for, and so he observed the bedlam he had instigated with an insane glee as he continued to fire down into the crowd. Round after round after round rang out as sheer pandemonium erupted, and Whitman was only just getting started. At that exact moment, a tightly composed yet informal posse of completely outgunned local Austin police began to attempt consistently and incredibly valiant efforts to disrupt the universality of Whitman's brutal and lasting assault, aiming to discover, in real time, any conceivable counterpositions available to either draw fire off of the innocent or to simply curtail by force the mad sniper's seemingly limitless arsenal. Yet Whitman had more than planned for this predictable contingency as well. And so, as his trusted long gun he began the assault with had begun to overheat and jam up, Whitman tossed the smoking weapon aside and then brandished his even deadlier M1 carbine rifle, to now also strike back against the defensive volleys of rapid fire offered up by law enforcement. And Whitman knew that if all else failed, and lawmen eventually were able to climb those endless stairs to the top of the clock tower and breach his interior fielding zone, he also had a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun with him for close quarters combat. If he was going down, Whitman would be damn sure to take a few cops with him. If they wanted to stop him, they were gonna have to come and get him the hard way. Meanwhile, all the way across campus, standing in a tight, crowded circle inside a tiny, rarely used janitor's closet at the very far end of a back hallway in the nearby Roberts building, a trio of young men, all sophomore students, were sneakily passing a joint around amidst a silvery screen of stale, wafting pot smoke. The three young men were blazing high and in a state of pure, inebriated bliss, completely unaware of the murderous carnage happening only hundreds of feet away outside. One of the three young men, a young UT Austin second-year film student, pulled one last deep rip off the quickly dematerializing joint. He slowly exhaled, and then passed what was left of it off, and then dreamily glanced down at his wristwatch, which jerked his attention back down to earth as the student realized through a thick tie stick high that he was yet again about to be late for yet another class. With his tousled wash of dark, greasy bangs held barely in place under the fringes of a neon green tie-dyed headband, the young man quietly bid his two smirking, equally squashed hippie buddies adieu, and pushed back out of the swinging door into the brightly lit hallway. Waving the lingering smoke out of his face and adjusting to the humming, fluorescent corridor lights above him, he hurried down what seemed like an endlessly stretching hallway, finally making his way into a stairwell and all the way down the echoing level after level of stairs, before reaching the ground floor leading to the outer quad and the tangle of buildings standing between him and his class. The young man had arrived at the ground floor steel door nearly at full momentum, and he pushed through without so much as stopping, exploding out onto the open-air quad, with the hot, early afternoon sun hitting him like a wall. Yet almost immediately, and even as stoned as he was, the young man stopped dead set in his tracks as he adjusted to the sounds of people screaming in the near distance, which led him to notice a throng of stampeding, frightened students and staff moving like a terrified pack of prey animals, all flailing desperately over each other and out of the way of what sounded like a quick series of distinct, repeating, thinly deafening pops that he assumed had to be some kind of poorly timed campus prank, or one of those tripped-out happenings he had been hearing all about. But it only took a moment more to squarely realize, as a native Texan himself, and even as more sharp pops cut through the heavy summer air, that this impossible sound was gunfire. His reflexive realization was, however, quickly shattered, as an unforgiving crack of rifle volley struck an uncomfortably nearby brick wall, no more than 20 feet from his still cloudy head. And then in rapid succession, another ping broke a window pane of glass to his right, and yet another skip-shredded a visible smoking groove across the pavement, only inches from his untied Converse All-Star. In those immediate, raging handful of seconds, which felt like a slow eternity of disorientation and noise, a lone police officer, not much older than himself, rounded a nearby corner and locked eyes with the clearly terrified and dangerously frozen young student. The officer immediately began stridently sprinting directly towards him, and at full tilt. Still high as a kite and now in full paranoid panic, the young student instinctually threw his hands up in the air in immediate submission, as the officer, without slowing his proactive momentum by even a second, nearly tackled him, physically pushing him backwards, courageously using himself as a human shield, while bullets shredded the tense air around them in a thudding successive series of sharp, pulsing thwacks. The police officer soundly then shoved the young student right back through the very same steel door that he had only seconds before spilled out of, leaving him back within the marginal safety of interior cover. The student couldn't have known the identity of his personal savior at that crucial moment in time, but it was Officer Billy Paul Speed, and his selfless bravery in the line of fire had just saved his life from the lethal objectives of a lone and deranged gunman. Now presumably safe, the young student watched the sheer unimaginable madness unfold through the small portico window built into the steel-reinforced door he was hiding behind. He peered with amazement as that brave young police officer immediately spun himself back around, returning to his single-minded task of assisting as many other innocent bystanders as humanly possible. Yet as the heroic officer took his first clear step forward, another sharp crack rang out from above, and in less than a fleeting instant, the young student watched in pure horror as Officer Billy Paul Speed's head jerked impossibly sideways, while his body stiffened with an awkward spasm before collapsing to the pavement in a dull, still heap. Officer Billy Paul Speed had suffered a lethal headshot, and his young life was instantly and incontrovertibly extinguished. Before the student could even wrap his consciousness around the shock of what he just witnessed, the relentless, incessant firing ramped up once again, a strafing bullet slamming directly against the very door he was cowering behind, sending him flailing backwards against the wall. Officer Billy Paul Speed was, at the time of his brutal murder, only 22 years old, and ironically enough, he had only just recently made the incredibly difficult decision to ultimately leave the police force at the end of that year in order to return to his studies, so to provide a much more stable and safe future for himself and his growing young family. Something he would now never have the chance to do. as the mass murder of dozens of students, staff, and civilians continued on into what felt like multiple eternities, the young student, now sober as a judge, continued to stand there, behind that blood-spattered portico window, in a state nearing a numbly bewildered paralysis. And as the madman above began to tear through the remainder of his seemingly endless arsenal of ammunition, Charles Whitman calmly sat with his back against the north wall of the clock tower's angled peak, and waited, with his racked and ready 12-gauge shotgun aimed directly at any potential comers. A handful of moments later, with his options expiring after a tense standoff, Austin police officers Ramiro Martinez and Houston McCoy ultimately valorously fought their way step by step up to Whitman's murderous perch, where they were finally able to work in tandem to eventually counteract his final volley of defenses, ultimately distracting him long enough to finally neutralize him, striking the mass murderer multiple times in the head, neck, and torso, with a fatal barrage of bullets not unlike what Whitman himself had just hellishly unleashed onto the world beneath him. And nearly 100 horrific minutes after the abominable madness had manifested, it was over, and a grievous wash of pained confusion, agony, and grief fell across the quickly evacuating campus center, a place once normally so full of life, laughter, and learning, now a ravaged, cratered war zone soaked with innocent blood, unlike anything ever witnessed before on the presumed safety of American soil. Finally, when the dust settled, and with the entire world watching on in painfully aggrieved silence, the media christened the event the Texas Clock Tower Massacre. It was the first horrendous mass murder of its kind ever recorded in American history. Charles Whitman brutally murdered 17 people during his infamous assault that summer day in Texas, and he badly wounded another 32. A former Boy Scout and dutiful Marine, as he matured into his mid-20s, Whitman mysteriously began to suffer a cascade of serious physical and ultimately mental illnesses that drastically altered his personality and daily life. Earlier that summer, Whitman reportedly expressed to a local psychiatrist that he was suffering uncontrollable fits of rage that seemed incongruous with his normal mental state. He stated emphatically that he was losing control of his thoughts, and that he was having blackouts and abhorrent ideas that were slowly evolving into calculated obsessions. He purportedly even told his family physician that he was literally considering climbing up to height with a rifle to shoot and kill as many people as possible. But it seems the doctor took this as nothing more than a former soldier's artificial expression of inner torment, and not a specific threat. He never alerted law enforcement to Whitman's now obvious potential of violence, especially considering that Whitman himself had qualified top of his class as a long-range sharpshooter during Marine boot camp, a talent he was even awarded for during basic training. That morning, on August 1st, 1966, prior to setting off for the University of Texas at Austin, Whitman had begun his devastating assault by stabbing both his own mother and young wife to death, and he saw this as something of a tender mercy. Whitman wanted his last act of kindness on this earth to be saving them from the embarrassment and shame of what he was about to do. And in an eerie twist of fate, post-mortem, a medical examiner performing Charles Whitman's autopsy discovered a pecan-sized glioblastoma, a brain tumor, lurking directly above his amygdala, which many believe to have been a driving catalyst for his unfettered madness and violence. And the reason I share this story, the young student whose life was so valiantly saved by the bravery and sacrifice of Officer Billy Paul Speed, his name was Tobe Hooper. And it was 8 years later, in 1974, that, focused through the prism of Hooper's traumatized imagination, the Texas Clock Tower Massacre would transmogrify into one of the most terrifying, unnerving, and unforgettably bleak motion pictures in American history: the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was the summer of '66, and Charles Whitman's unmitigated rampage, where it all seemed to change, where we seemingly began to reflect something back at ourselves in the stories we were telling and being told, that offered a much more troubling and dissociative portrait of American life than perhaps at any other time in our shared cultural history. Between the eventual Manson family murders in the name of Helter Skelter 3 years later in August of 1969, and then the dark cultural undoing of Altamont that very same year, the sunshine of the transformative 1960s dimmed as a dawn of darkness began to spread. And in mainstream cinemas, movies like Psycho in 1960, Night of the Living Dead in 1968, The Exorcist in 1973, and then, of course, finally, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974, ushered in a new age of subversive, take-no-prisoners American horror that would go on to inspire an even more disturbing and evolving array of villainy, nihilism, and over-the-top gleeful violence and gore that would ultimately change the landscape of on-screen Hollywood horror forever. And as writer Kim Henkel and director Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre blazed its way into packed drive-ins and movie houses full of teenagers screaming to the rafters, the movie routinely incited sheer terror in sickened, dizzy audiences all across the country, powering its way into the zeitgeist and earning an astonishing $37 million during its independent theatrical run. Not bad for a movie that cost well under $200,000 to produce and market. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was both a cultural sensation and a magnet for eager controversy, and from the moment of its release, it burned itself into the psyches of almost every single person brave enough to see the film in a darkened theater. And from the moment of the now iconic Fright film's release, there he was. A character unlike anything ever seen on screen before. A nightmare of a man reduced to pure, hungry id, hunched blankly in dark repose, clad terrifyingly in a primitive flesh mask, stitched together from the very faces of his many victims. This was the character of Leatherface in all of his hulking, blood-soaked glory. With his trusty chainsaw hanging on the wall behind him, this lumbering monster of a man in a viscera-soaked butcher's apron sprung from the very darkest fringes of our communal imagination. A greasy slaughterhouse hammer in the unshakable grip of one of his mammoth sweaty fists, standing guard at the dead center of the American cultural labyrinth, forever waiting there behind the cold corrugated steel door leading directly into the future of modern American horror. This is the milieu of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you quickly learn that there really are only two simple rules. You eat what you kill, and the saw is family. And this is where our Season 4 story truly begins. This is where the slasher era really kicks off. This is the story of one of the most frightening films and film franchises of all time. This is the history, legacy, and lore of writer Kim Henkel and director Tobe Hooper's shocking, seminal, sensational, stone-cold classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Joe, here we are. I should say, here we sit down in dusty basement. Here we sit, beginning our journey through our 4th consecutive season of Haddonfield Radio. And oh, lordy Lou, boy howdy, does that blow my mind. I cannot get my head around the fact that we're already 4 seasons deep into Haddonfield Radio. And before I ask you the question of questions, let us just take a moment.
Yes.
And let's just ruminate, if you will, for a moment or two.
Just
let's
sit in our own stink.
Stay in the present tense for our listeners right here, settled in the present. Let's take a moment to just observe the fact that we are beginning not only our 4th season, as I mentioned, we are about to endeavor on a journey through one of the most frightening film franchises of all time. Am I right?
You're right.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. Before we go any further, quick little thing. Is chainsaw one word or 2 words? I've always thought it was one word.
I think it's one word. They did spell it as 2 words in their scroll, right? In their opening crawl.
In most of the marketing, it seems to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And if you even listen to John Larroquette, he seems to pronounce it as 2 words.
Exactly.
If you will.
Yeah. I don't know if that was done on purpose. Maybe there was legal stuff there. Maybe it was just I don't know if chainsaw is somehow copyrighted as one word by the company.
I wanted to posit a theory, though.
Anyway.
I actually have this weird theory that perhaps due to the cultural influence of this exact movie, that the term chainsaw, as opposed to what other kind of saw is there? A band saw? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Does that sound like a real saw?
Yeah.
Or like, all different kinds of
scroll saw.
Yeah. I wonder if after this movie cratered culture the way it did, that suddenly there became this idea of just a chainsaw, which is just a specific thing.
Yeah.
Kind of
maybe it changed after this.
Exploding out of the consciousness of this film, or into consciousness from this film. Yeah. You see, it's just a thought.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. That was one rabbit hole I didn't go down, was the history of the word chainsaw. It's
sort of occurring to me just in the moment.
There was a lot of rabbit holes to go down. But
I have to say, this, of all the movies we've ever covered, now this is our 35th movie just in terms of Haddonfield Radio that we've done commentaries for.
Okay.
I would say this by far is the most amount of information that is just available about not only the making of the movie, the legacy of the movie, sort of the cultural synthesis the movie became. It's actually overwhelming.
I was saying to you earlier, I'm like, there's a lot of the usual facts about just the making of a movie. Every movie has, right? The story of how this movie got made. But then there's the bigger conversations you can have about its impact, its influences, what it influenced, and its legacy, really, in horror. Because, it does get lumped into the slasher sort of thing, or
it seems
because
to be
it's
part
sort of
it is part of the ramp up of the slasher
it is.
era.
It's part of the seed that will grow into this, but it's almost kind of its own thing too.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's
of
not.
course.
It doesn't fit a lot of the traditional slasher molds that will stem out from this. But Leatherface is, one of those early, horror evil characters that people kind of latch onto as the star of the movie, the Michael Myers, the Jason, the Freddy, and he's often brought in with those three, rightly so. But there's a different thing also going on with Chainsaw.
And I think a lot of that in the film's legacy comes after the fact.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And certainly after those other iconic characters entered into culture.
Yeah.
At that point, Leatherface almost gets retroactively recontextualized into the slasher milieu as a character. But at the time, you could almost look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974.
Yeah.
It has a lot of kind of art film history in its DNA as well. And Tobe Hooper was like in love with filmmakers like Truffaut.
Yeah.
And a lot of like international film. And you certainly could make an argument that while the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a classic horror film, it's also really an art film in a way. It's very expressionistic and very unusual. And I would say a lot of the films that kind of categorized the style and the aesthetic of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a lot of the stuff that came before it probably falls more in line with independent or art house fare. Mm-hmm. But continue.
Well, I mean, this was up until Halloween. A few years later, this was the most successful independent film ever made.
And it was a monster success.
So, I mean, as much as it was horrifying, some people getting some really extreme reactions, getting some really extreme criticism because of these, evil ideas, quote unquote, it did make a lot of money, showing also the appeal by audiences who like to go in and, get scared. It was the next evolution of Psycho, in a way. It was that pushing it to a place where like the censors or critics kind of go, maybe that was too far. And it wasn't too far,
It's all in the intentional energy of the film. That I think if you were an audience member in 1974, like you go to the drive-in and see Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right?
Yeah.
I think you would leave the movie remembering a much more violent, profoundly gory or grotesque film than it actually is. Everything that is sort of negatively attributed to this movie seems to come out of the thin air of never having actually been in the film. Like, my mother, when I originally mentioned we were doing these movies, her reaction was like a very visceral one, that this was an intensely violent, subversive movie. And yet, yes, there is extreme violence in this film, but it's certainly not the goriest film of all time.
There's not a lot of blood.
No.
And done on purpose.
But yet it has the effect on your psyche.
I mean, the name, it conjures that imagery. And when you walk away feeling as scared as especially the audiences back then were getting, it kind of just fills in blanks that don't need really to be filled in, but it makes it worse than it was. First fun fact here is only one person actually gets killed by the chainsaw.
And that's Franklin,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Wait, that's right.
Right?
You're absolutely right.
I mean, so like
it's not exactly a chainsaw massacre.
It really isn't. Yeah.
It's not a chain. It just occurred to me in this exact moment. It is not a chainsaw massacre.
The chainsaw is used to dismember and
True. Good
attack.
point. I like that.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely right.
But
We're back in massacre territory.
But in terms of just straight out, like, I'm going to kill you with this, it's only
right.
Franklin, right?
But I would argue that sequence, that iconic sequence where Gunnar Hansen's Leatherface just starts boring holes in Franklin, and not to mention in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I find it very shrewd and very cagey of both writer Kim Henkel and director Tobe Hooper that they put one of their leads in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. So the most vicious murder, arguably, in the film happens to someone who is literally disabled.
That was done on purpose.
Of course.
They made note that you don't usually attack disabled people in horror movies.
Far more psychologically unsettling, and it adds just this other level in the patina of violence.
It's part of the dark humor of this film.
Humor.
Which, when Henkel and Hooper were writing, and they were going back and forth, doing pages and checking out each other's work, they knew they found something, or the scene worked, or it was done when they were both laughing at it. When that dark humor presented itself,
It's really funny that you bring that up, because in revisiting this movie in order to prepare for this episode, the thing that was the most profound to me is how many times during the first night I watched it, I was laughing during it.
Oh, yeah.
First off, I hate to say this. It's going to make me look like a complete noob. But I had literally sort of categorically forgotten in relation to the first film how hilarious Gunnar Hansen's performance and in all the physicality is almost like on the level of like Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin.
The Keystone Cops, it's all those,
like
pointed
silent
out.
film acting.
When he's running through the house, Leatherface, and he's going to the window having his freak out, like, where are all these people coming?
It's hilarious.
Look at him.
And
it's
all
like
the grunting and noises.
Yeah.
And then when he... And also, I was really taken aback by how much sensitivity I felt in this, catching back up with the film, how much sensitivity I felt for Leatherface, the way he keeps trying to take on all these different roles in order to fit in and serve his family unit.
Yeah,
in that he himself is, in relation to attacking Franklin in a wheelchair, is disabled.
Yeah.
In a way, his attack of Franklin, in a way, is on a level playing field because he himself is clearly disabled.
Well, except he doesn't have a chainsaw.
And Tobe Hooper actually molded specialized little teeth for Gunnar Hansen to wear.
No, hold on.
Didn't he?
Gunnar Hansen had his dentist make those teeth, and he had him, look like more like kids' teeth. And Gunnar Hansen,
because that is called Hutchinson's teeth. And it's indicative of inbreeding and very, very low IQ mental disability.
Mentally handicapped people.
Yes.
And Gunnar Hansen, in preparing for this role, went to a home for mentally handicapped people.
I read that.
And he kept studying them and watching them until he could act like them, and the nurses. He was indistinguishable. You know what I mean, to the people there. There's definitely, that was brought to the character of Leatherface, this idea that he is handicapped and he doesn't really have his own identity. He does have to keep switching to fit these roles within
he has basically like
family.
3 identities.
Yeah.
He's got the killer mask,
but it's not him,
the mother, and then like the old lady.
Yeah.
And they do serve 3 different specific functions. And in my research, I read a lot of, and I'm going to get into this as we go on, but and actually give credit where credit is due, but I read a lot of very interesting thought pieces and analysis of like the occult symbolism that's all through this movie, and even Leatherface kind of switching between these almost like maiden mother crone type personas, and with his masks and his gender fluidity.
Well, there's the huge subtext of the man wanting to become a woman type of thing.
It's really, in some ways, very ahead of its time.
Oh yeah,
storytelling wise, in mainstream, American film.
You can break down this film,
but it comes
forever.
right out of Psycho too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It was the next step of like Psycho.
Yeah.
It had
like
all
the
the
genetic
hallmarks,
material,
but brought to instead of the grandfather, it's the mummified mom, and there's a lot of very similar elements. It's just the evolution of Hitchcock, really. You know,
in my intro, I mentioned this idea of this dawn of darkness, and then you have Psycho, Night of the Living Dead, The Exorcist, and this.
Yeah.
Another film that I realized after the fact I absolutely should have added as an antecedent to Chainsaw is Last House on the Left by Wes Craven.
Yeah.
I see a lot of DNA, if you will, of Last House on the Left in the Texas Chainsaw, in that both of those films are depicted in such brutal, realistic, almost like you're looking at like an Andrew Wyeth painting or something like that, like just true, brutal realism. That the idea, and we'll get into this, the way the movie was marketed as a quote-unquote true story, it all sort of creates this hypnosis over the audience.
Yeah, it's very real. You know, I can't remember who it was, but in my research, I remember someone saying, like, it looks like someone like just found the family, the Sawyer family found a running camera and just brought it in the house with them, and it's just being plopped down, and it happens just to be recording this what's in front of it in just a very realistic and kind of simple way. Not to say that the cinematography is simple in any way, but their approach is not flashy. They're not.
It's, I would say, the cinematography by Daniel Pearl is astonishingly simple.
Well, it is.
And it's done in a way that, in its simplicity, it allows for the story to just unfold in all of its ferocity.
Daniel Pearl did this like right out of college. He was very young. This was his first real film, and
it's incredible.
As much as he was, great at what he did at that point in his age, he does mention now, looking back, how he didn't know any better to do certain things. But there's usually this unintentional outcome from some of his, I don't want to say amateurness at the time, or just lack of experience, that usually benefited the film's themes and feeling and everything else.
That rawness.
Very raw.
Visceral.
A lot.
And Tobe Hooper himself had come out of documentary filmmaking. He had actually, I think it's so funny that he had made a Peter, Paul, and Mary documentary before Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I find that, even though he was a total hippie, it sort of makes sense.
I think even it's
counterculture.
Texas Chainsaw was his second feature film, so he kind of gets looked at like, it was only his second film. He was new. Because it was only his second feature film, but he had done like 60 documentaries, like you talked about.
And commercials.
And so he was pretty
things.
seasoned to a certain degree in terms of, which is why I think, what helped this movie actually get finished with the low funds it had and the rough conditions of the heat,
God.
Debilitating
Edwin
heat
Neal,
that was going on there.
Who played the Hitchhiker, said he had served in Vietnam. And not only did he serve in Vietnam, he was in the shit.
Yeah.
And he said it did
people
not
trying
even
to kill me.
And he said it did not even compare to the degradation and horrors he experienced.
He's like, if I ever see Tobe Hooper again, I'll probably punch him or something like that. Yeah, it was rough. And I think Tobe Hooper got a little rough, with the people at times pushed him and
but that's what he. But as
you had
directorially,
yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
he was trying to bring a mania out of people.
It was kind of falling apart in a way too towards the end, and I think he did what he had to do to get it done.
People have noticed as a detail, and it really, when I read this in one of the analysis pieces I read. You know how there are so many shots where you see those like bloodshot eyes?
Yeah.
That's because she had been screaming so much that she was actually blowing blood vessels in her eyes and capillaries from just being in a state. Now, as an actor, if you have to spend hours of a day in a state of hysterical emotion where you're screaming, completely frazzled and freaked out, eventually your physical brain, not your mind, but your brain just starts to believe that reality.
And that's exactly what happened to multiple actors during that last big key dinner scene.
And you can see it
They filmed for 27 hours straight, and the reason was that the actor that had to wear the makeup for Grandpa, it was a 10 hours to get into the makeup. And then they were going to have to shoot for, so all of a sudden, he comes out of makeup and says, "This is so awful. I refuse to do this again."
The application of it?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
He goes, "I refuse to do it again, so you have to finish all my scenes now." So they just stayed up for 27 hours, and even Gunnar Hansen talks about getting to a point of such deliriousness from the heat especially, and all the food that was rotting in there because of the heat. They had actual head cheese,
animal carcasses,
and they had actual head
bones,
cheese, right?
Which I want to get into.
It was 125 degrees in there. They were filming during the day, so they blacked it out. Which means they hang the big black curtains on the outside of the house, which is just trapping all the heat in. And Gunnar Hansen said, like, there was a point where he just wasn't thinking and he wasn't acting. He just was like Leatherface. And there's the line when the hitchhiker is kind of like, yeah, go ahead, kill that bitch. He was just like, okay, I'm just gonna go kill that bitch. He just, and he had to be like, whoa, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like this is. And there's a lot of stories about that night, and we'll bring them up, when it's appropriate as we go. But, they did get to a point of complete
hysteria.
Yeah, and there was, and on top, so all this is going on in the house, and then at the same time, for whatever reason, one of the PAs or type of someone low. Was given the job to get rid of all these bones that they'd gotten from the vets, right? This is the last day of sort of like they're finishing up shooting. So they just piled them up behind the house and set them on fire. And then so all this fumes and smoke started going in the house too, and it smelled awful.
Let me ask you something real quick.
Yeah.
Do you think it was a much more common occurrence back in those days and even before the mid-'70s that filmmakers used actual human remains like skeletons on film sets? Or is this just some weird eccentricity? Because Tobe Hooper does that again in Poltergeist.
Right.
He apparently used real human remains in Salem's Lot. That's 3 different films. But was that a commonality of the time, I wonder?
I don't know. I don't think so. I have to imagine.
Because it's very creepy to me.
It was, for this film, for Texas Chainsaw, he only bought one full human skeleton from India,
which is what a classroom would have had.
Yeah, for usually for scientific stuff, but they used it multiple ways throughout the filming of this film.
Now, do you feel that is a taboo, or is that something that you just say it's a skeleton that you bought from a catalog?
Well, it's not something I would ever do. I don't think.
Really? Wow. So you would feel that because it just strikes me as a very strange idiosyncrasy of Tobe Hooper's in his productions.
I think it fits in the realm of independent filmmaking, doing whatever you got to do to get it done. I think there's probably much crazier stories about other filmmakers than that. But certainly,
by the time
they didn't do anything illegal.
By the time
it's just unconventional.
By the time he's working with Spielberg on Poltergeist, they certainly could have fabricated human skeletons, but instead they used actual human remains.
And that turned into a whole thing. We talk about that in our Poltergeist episode.
And we do a Poltergeist episode.
They had to have
we go into this.
Native American rituals and stuff performed because of those skeletons.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Well, that is my point. My point is, esoterically speaking, I think that can bring a certain energy into the actual film itself, especially through that alchemical kind of, creation of film.
So, besides the human skeleton, they were using a lot of real animal skeletons.
Yeah, they backed a truck up full of animal remains.
There was a vet in the area, a veterinarian that told them where he had been piling up the carcasses of animals that had passed away or that owners didn't take, or roadkill, all these things, right? And they just started rifling, through and took what they needed.
There's a shot where the flies coming out of that poor dog's corpse, of the eye of the dog. Maybe this is not from Chainsaw? Maybe that's from a different movie.
Well, they were gonna originally start on the dead dog's eye instead of the armadillo.
It could have been I watched, for our listeners in the present, both Joe and I watched this incredible documentary that came out here in 2026 called Chain Reactions.
Yeah, it's really good.
And it is a documentary that explores the legacy of Texas Chainsaw through the perspectives, I should say, of a bunch of different kind of horror and just cultural luminaries. And it may have been from a movie they were talking about in that documentary that I now associate with Chainsaw. But the fact that all through the runtime of Chainsaw, you repeatedly see clear animal remains, carcasses, bones. It does bother me. Like, it's something I found uncomfortable about the entire aesthetic. But yet, it was bringing out in me uncomfortable feelings, which is what a horror film is designed to do.
Yeah.
So in and of itself, that is a successful approach of the film.
I mean, there's many different times and many different ways this film very effectively makes the audience uncomfortable, which is probably why, a lot of people like it.
I agree.
It's back to the old. It's fun to be scared, and scared in new ways.
And Chainsaw is such a cauldron of so much genre of the past.
And
it's got like the haunted house vibe. It has the a vampire movie kind of thematics. It has bits of Frankenstein in it.
It's sort of got a classic setup, structure. It's a familiar story that you can trace back to like so many different films, and that was a great thing about that documentary we were just talking about, the Chain Reactions, is you got these 5 different people from different countries, and they're all explaining how they can see chainsaws influence in films from Australia, films from America, all these different, and so it's like one of these films I feel like just a lot of people can relate to and see in other things that they love, because it hits the mark on all these different levels. And I think that before we go too far, we should talk about your intro. We kind of just started this, and its effect, because part of this whole thing is the famous story you hear about.
The myth making behind the making of this movie, or the origin of this movie.
The classic story of him, Tobe Hooper standing in line
at a department store
in the holidays, and just like wanting to, seeing the chainsaw in the store, and then wanting to murder everybody because it was maddening.
Imagine like a Black Friday type scenario. Yeah. He's waiting there in line. He's surrounded by nothing but rabid consumerism. He's looking outside the window of the department store and seeing a long, long line of cars because of the gasoline crisis.
Shortage,
And so there was like gasoline rationing, and people were becoming more aggressive. And he even described seeing people who had almost like a rabid look in their eyes. And that he's in line, people like wanting to buy like Christmas presents for their kids, and they're like reeking of booze, and it just started to creep him out. And he says that, and I believe this, I was saying to Joe earlier before we started recording, when I say myth making when I'm talking about this story, I'm not saying like this event didn't happen. I do believe this event probably did happen to Tobe Hooper. And then he looks over in a department store and he sees like on the tools section chainsaws on the wall, and he just, or chain saws on the wall, and he just starts imagining or fantasizing about, I could just get one of those chainsaws, rev it to life, and all these people would run for the hills, and I could shop in peace. And then in the later years, he sort of evolved this story, or this kind of myth-making, to include the idea that on the car ride home from the department store, he said between getting in his car in the parking lot and getting back to his home, he had basically visualized out all the plot points, including this hulking sort of mythological flesh mask wearing character called Leatherface. All of that may be actually realistically true, but there is so much in the marketing, the design, and intentional kind of manufacturing of not just the movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but the event that it sort of became in a cultural sense, that is about myth-making. Even the very idea that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, quote, based on a true story is in and of itself myth-making. And so seeing Tobe Hooper's penchant for kind of, print the legend, so to speak.
Yeah, and also fans of big things like this tend to almost demand, like, they want to know, how did you come up with something? How did you? And I think this has become the story that he could tell. But you have to look at this man's past and history, and you can see many other things that must have contributed to what was going on in his head, including the story of the Clock Tower Massacre that you told. Because
and this isn't the
how
only...
can this be a part of this man's past? And it's not brought up a lot when you do research about Tobe in this movie.
When somebody experiences a horrific trauma, and you have to understand that back in the mid-1960s, people didn't understand trauma, even use a word semantically like trauma that we use now.
They didn't know about post-traumatic syndrome.
You might have been called shell-shocked if you had served in the military. But you also have to remember, in terms of the Charles Whitman massacre, there had never been anything like that on American soil since the Civil War.
Right.
And so it's not like culture had been, like we are now, inured to these events, almost expect these events as part of the fabric of our daily life and consciousness. Back then, this was a true horrific anomaly. The reason why I believe Tobe Hooper never publicly attributed his proximity to the Charles Whitman massacre as the actual origin for this film is because the myth-making, I think, served as a protective shield between the public's expectation of an origin story and him not having to repeatedly spend the rest of his life reliving an event that was probably very ruinous to his psyche.
It's probably wouldn't even really be considered the origin story, but it's got to be part
you're
of
absolutely right.
what was in his
consciousness.
It's weird because once I started getting more details about the story and him witnessing this cop being shot in the head, right? I started seeing these interviews doing research for this, where I noticed he always liked to point out the part where Leatherface hits the first victim, the male with the hammer.
Yep.
And the guy falls and he starts convulsing.
Yep.
And he says,
Yes,
for whatever
I know
reason,
right where you're
a
going.
lot of people questioned that or thought it was weird, which I don't know. I find weird that people would question. I mean, the guy just got hit in the head, but anyway. But he seemed to always go out of his way to explain, well, you know, when this would happen, fragments of a skull would go into someone's brain, causing these convulsions. And I feel
it's like, where do you think he may have observed that
exactly.
before?
Why was he so sure?
It's not like
to
people
point
had
out
the internet
that
back then.
He knew this would happen. You know,
the human consciousness was not privy to horrors like that.
Yeah.
It was an extreme rarity.
Yeah.
And so and I can tell you guys, I can show you at least 5 or 6 pieces of first-person anecdotal evidence that states that Tobe did witness Officer Billy Paul Speed's death after being literally saved by him.
Yeah.
Now, I don't care what anybody would say. No matter who you are, even a laconic Texan like Tobe Hooper, the strong, silent type.
Yeah.
That impact psychologically would be devastating, especially when you look at it under the relative sense that no one would have any experience other than soldiers, police officers, or the random people who are also caught up in random horror like that.
And I don't, want to dwell on the stories of Hooper's drug use. That's been well sort of documented.
Very well publicized.
But you kind of know why,
like a self-medicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's, exactly. Like it's not, just because he wanted to go, do blow and I mean, imagine, have fun. It was probably to numb something that was in there. Didn't you also say that photos by him ended up in Life?
After I researched and actually recorded the intro story for this episode, I continued just researching because I was very interested in the entire connection of Charles Whitman, or the intersection of Charles Whitman and Tobe Hooper. And wait, what were you just asking me though?
That about his photos in Life.
So it turns out that one of the friends of his that I positioned him kind of smoking weed with before was someone who constantly carried a little camera around on his neck. And so when this event occurred, him and Tobe walked around and just started snapping pictures of the carnage, essentially. And many of those photographs ended up publicized in that iconic issue of Life magazine that covered the Charles Whitman shooting.
Crazy.
And if you want to see one of the most evocative and frightening cover images or representative images of an event, Google the Life magazine Charles Whitman cover, because it is haunting.
Yeah.
It is. And I wonder if that, I don't know this for a fact, I'd have to look into this again, but if that cover image might not have been taken by his friend.
Oh,
and
sure.
I'm going to look
for,
see, I have the friend's name in my notes. I'll find it eventually. But
I think now the other part of this story, again, I don't want to linger too long on this because I feel like this other idea has been well documented, but the whole Ed Gein thing, they're obviously,
you can't escape from it.
No, you can't. But what I didn't realize, until I really did a lot of research on the film, and I going into this, I I did not know a lot about the making of this film. It was just a rabbit hole I never went down. But you always heard about the association, and obviously the furniture, the human skin, all that is taken from that story that Hooper had in his head. But I thought it was fascinating that he didn't even know that it was Ed Gein till years after the movie came out that he was sort of basing these things on. He had relatives in Wisconsin, where Ed Gein was from, and he would go there as a child, like young, like 4 years old, and they would tell him these horrific stories of this guy just a couple miles away who had done these things, but they really didn't tell him his name or anything.
And isn't it an interesting kind of secondary connection there, that what we were just talking about, the Ed Gein murders had a very similar cultural effect to the Charles Whitman massacre, in that it was such an singularity of evil and horror.
Yeah.
It was something that nobody thought could happen. Like, nobody had ever heard of anything like Ed Gein on American soil.
And obviously, he gets lumped in a lot of times as like a serial killer, but he only killed 2 people. What he did a lot of, like in Texas Chainsaw, was the grave robbing.
He was
and dismembering of the bodies and making furniture.
Yeah, in literature, in storytelling tradition, yes, you're absolutely right. It's never been right to call Ed Gein a serial killer. He was a ghoul.
Yeah.
He was a necrophiliac ghoul.
Yeah.
He was somebody who saw beauty in corruption and death.
Yep. But also
and an attraction to it.
Put on those other identities with the skin of the women and
He was trying to also bring his mother. His mother was his whole world. She passed away, and then he wanted to bring his mother, kind of manifest her back into reality through his own kind of personification of his mother, or characterization. Now, and that it was happening. The creepy thing with Ed Gein that I think may have affected Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel, and certainly affects, I think, anybody, is that it was going on behind the closed doors of a quiet, farmhouse that you would see dotting the Wisconsin landscape. And he was a soft-spoken, gentle person who would go down to the soda stand, and he was known around town. He wasn't a creep. He wasn't a lunatic.
I can't remember offhand. Do you know the years that was going on?
It had to be the 1950s.
I say, so this was also pre-Psycho, him, probably.
This was what inspired Psycho.
Exactly.
In Robert Bloch's novel.
It's interesting, you can see, stemming from his story at Gein, that we get Psycho translating almost into Texas Chainsaw, a lot of the same themes. Then down the line, we get Silence of the Lambs, and I don't think it's any coincidence that the production manager on this film, Ron Bozeman on Texas Chainsaw, was one of the producers of Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, of course. It is a true genetic lineage.
Yeah, you can see that these ideas sort of keep getting regurgitated in different ways.
Just like you would see in human lineage. You go from Psycho to Chainsaw to Silence of the Lambs. Yeah. It's a stream. It's sort of a stream moving through culture and cutting through the zeitgeist, this dark artery that's been sort of mined numerous times, because we want to reflect this repeatedly back at ourselves, because it confuses the consciousness of the collective. These aberrant behaviors, and yet every one of us is deeply drawn to it and fascinated by it. That lends a sort of feeling that we are all sort of Ed Gein in a way. You know what I mean? And it was also the crimes of Dean Corll and Elmer Wayne Henley that was very, very influential to Kim Henkel in particular.
Listen, now Kim Henkel had his own sort of
and basically
influences.
In a nutshell, those were crimes that were kind of homosexually motivated. It was essentially it was almost like the way vampirism works. You have the master vampire, and then you have all the people he's turned into vampires, collecting blood and victims for the master. Well, Dean Corll worked that way. He was this sort of like a Manson-esque, charismatic criminal figure who kind of insinuated these weaker men to sort of be his minions, and they would bring victims to him. And if you want to ever read some of the creepiest American, like what I would call Americana true crime, look up Elmer Wayne Henley, Dean
Yeah.
Corll, this whole story that really got under the skin of screenwriter Kim Henkel.
Yeah, I have a whole quote from him talking about
Go ahead, read it.
how he definitely used Gein but also the Elmer Wayne Henley, who was a young man recruited victims for an older homosexual man.
Yeah.
And he said he saw a news report where Elmer Wayne said, "Yeah, I did these crimes and I'm going to stand up and take it like a man," which he said struck him as very interesting, the conventional morality at this point, that now that it was known and he was caught, he would do the right thing now, you know, even though now that he was caught. So he thought that this sort of moral schizophrenia, which you kind of see.
What a great term that is.
In The Cook. I mean, I think if you watch throughout the movie, you see this like personality bouncing back and forth between like almost concern and then complete, you know, craziness, like back in it. And then sometimes he's, you know, while the brothers are trying to kill the girl, he's kind of in the background.
And the actor,
you know,
Jim Sydow, he is chilling.
Yeah.
I think of all of the performances, and there's a great realism to every single performance in this film. You know how it is. A lot of these movies, especially when you're working essentially with friends and many non-actors in a way, in not just this film, but a lot of the films like we've covered that are these independent, you know, films. You know, you just want to get the best you can get. And I think some of the best performances in Chainsaw are the real Texan people that populate the fringes of the film.
Yeah.
Like the cowboy that's like, "I'm going to now run away with your girl." You know,
well, those were all local actors, though. They were local.
were actors as well.
Yeah,
they
and some of them
so
were
much
like
real.
all those
hayseeds.
guys in the graveyard, like the one that's drunk. He was a local actor.
He looked like an actor.
And I think the guy you're talking about was like a radio DJ. Like they were all local, so they're not like seasoned actors at all.
Well, what strikes me is they are so real.
Yes, exactly.
They look like they grew right up out of the Texas dust and dirt. You know what I mean? Like they look as real as like.
Yeah, well, they are Texans. Like they, you know what I mean? He did get just, you know, because they didn't have money to be flying actual actors around or anything.
It just enforces that visceral hypnosis the film has over its audience, in that everyone you've seen it again, it looks like a documentary.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
That sequence where the drunk is in the tire and he's sort of doing the whole Crazy Ralph thing, the whole Cassandra mythology aspect, where he is essentially telling these kids, "You're all going to die. You're all going to die."
There's a lot of, I don't even want to call it foreshadowing, because it's less subtle than that. He really sets you up from the beginning. You know, it takes a little while to get to like what you want to call the true horror with Leatherface and all that. Like, you get the crawl in the beginning. They're telling you this is real and basically what's about to happen. Then you get those flashes of the decomposed body. And again, he's kind of showing you, like, get ready. Like, we're you know, this is what you're in for. You know, and then you get the first big sort of scene in the graveyard. And, you know, yes, you get the guy heralding the end of, you know, and it's like it. You should know that some wild shit is about to come. He's not... Especially
the way Tobe Hooper uses, like, media throughout the entire movie as almost like the Greek chorus of doom. It's if the radios are always talking about, like, astrological things. To those.
It's Saturn, like the zombie... In my head, it's like...
It doesn't remind you of Night of the Living Dead?
Exactly, that it might as well exist in the same universe as one of the classic zombie movies.
It really feels to me like George Romero's...
Like the rest of the world, it's happening.
Yes.
While this is going on in Texas, right?
George Romero's aesthetic in Night of the Living Dead specifically, and Tobe Hooper's aesthetic here in Chainsaw are so on the same frequency. Yeah. And yet, in both of these guys are such regional artists, too. Yeah. And regional representatives, artistic representatives of where they've grown up from. Yeah. And yet I see so much harmonization between Night of the Living Dead and Chainsaw. Yeah. In those exact, like in Night of the Living Dead, where the guy's like, throw them all over there on the fire. Yeah. It's the same type of realism. Yep. Where you're like, is that even an actor? Is this real? Wait a minute, is this real? Your mind gets confused.
Yeah, and it's got that same sort of aesthetic as a low budget, where it's not fancy camera work, it's not fancy effects and all that. So it's got a very, very realistic, grounded feel to it.
Can I just say though, there is one iconic shot, of course, in this movie.
Okay.
Now, I've always thought of it in my mind as the classic horror, butt shot. Where you follow a beautiful woman's ass into a scene, right?
Yeah.
And many directors have used this because it captures the attention of the viewer very quickly and like a lure to a fish, it draws you into what you're about to see.
Especially in this movie where it's pretty sexless.
So, of course, we're talking about that iconic shot. You see her bare back, her little red shorts. The part of the shot that I swear I've never noticed until this month, catching up for this episode, that absolutely astonished me was that the camera passes under the bench. And then, how do you think that's done? Because there's no bounciness and it's a perfectly smooth movement.
So they only had 40 feet of track, which is a dolly track, which is the camera on a platform with wheels that ride on rails, like a roller coaster. Okay, and it gets pushed by people. And so they only had 40 feet. And for some shots, which is not a lot, right? When you think about how quick you'll move down 40 feet when you're keeping up with people walking or something, right?
Yep.
And sometimes in this movie, they would have to do the old trick where as they're going, people are lifting up the track behind them and replacing it in front of them, right? So they can keep making longer shots.
How could you fit a camera rig under that bench?
No, because it was just low. I mean, you got to remember, so this film was filmed on a 16 millimeter a clear camera, basically what we used in film school.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
This was 16 millimeter?
16 millimeter.
Wow.
Right? It's a very small camera rig, and it was just low. It was like right on the tracks. And what they did was, as they get to the swing and she gets off, there are people off screen that are grabbing the swing and lifting it up. So then Daniel Pearl can stay with the camera and go under it. And, the great story about that shot is when it wasn't planned, they didn't have it in their, shooting schedule, something that they, Hooper and Pearl noticed that they could do there. And because it wasn't on the shooting schedule and stuff, the producers and the production people, they had a big fight over it. They knew they needed to shoot it, that they needed to have this shot, and everyone else is saying, no, you don't have the time and the money to be wasting on this. It wasn't in the plan. We got to move on. And Hooper and Pearl threatened to quit. And ultimately they won. And then it obviously it's become the shot that, they think is the best shot in the movie as well. Most fans are.
Beautifully
it's
composed.
Beautiful. They're using their widest lens. And the house, so what it's doing is because of the type of lens that they're using, let's put it this way, if you watch as you get closer, like the house grows. It's you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. I know.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It becomes much more imposing.
I also noticed, much like Doctor Who's TARDIS, it's much bigger on the inside.
Yeah.
The house, like a lot of film set interiors, where you see in the exterior of a certain location, and then you start to think about it, what's been going on in the interior. Like, how big is this house?
Yeah, but they actually did, though. They shot everything inside that house.
Wow.
Nothing was a set. Everything was
interesting.
there.
It has
there was a guy,
strange dissonance for me from the exterior to the interior. It seems so much bigger.
A guy named Smokey owned it, and there was like miscommunication where they shot for like 2 days, and then they were wrapping up. He's like, okay, well, you guys are done, right? And Tobe Hooper's like, no. I think it was more like 2 weeks. And he was like, oh, Jesus. And, they had the promise not to ruin anything, put everything back. But, of course, they kind of trashed the house and a little bit.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about that house. And
speaking
we'll
of the house, we have to talk about what I think, to me, one of the most impressive aspects of this film is the production design and art direction by Bob Burns.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, everybody kind of objectively knows it's a legendary expression of art design, this entire movie.
Yep.
I would argue further that I think a great deal of its magnetism, scope, effect comes directly from the artistry of Bob Burns.
For sure. He was a huge part of the aesthetic, the feel, the gross
It's almost like-
evilness, and Ed Gein again, a lot of his ideas came from the stories of what Ed Gein had done with his, victims in terms of the
or what his
the
home
lampshades
looked like.
and the armchairs,
Which
and
the police had taken so many photos on the inside of Ed Gein's house that all of this was accessible to Bob Burns.
But this is where I get a little confused because Tobe Hooper many, many, many times has said like he didn't know he was basing anything on Ed Gein by name until after, but yet
it's too similar.
You hear Bob Burns and even Kim Henkel talk about how they definitely based some of their work on Ed Gein.
And they
so
would
was
have
it
known
just coincidence?
Hitchcock, Psycho,
I don't know.
in the cultural history of Psycho, and certainly the inspiration to Robert Bloch.
Yeah,
that I find that again to be. It sounds to me
but I mean, Hooper said it multiple times. Yeah. But anyway. Yes, Bob Burns. Him and it was Dorothy Pearl.
Probably maybe related to Daniel Pearl.
That's what I just stuttered because I was reading it. I wonder. But she was also doing all the makeup stuff, and them together did a lot of they were the ones who got the bones and were finding the dead animals and even preserving them themselves. Mm-hmm. There's a funny story about Dorothy Pearl. She took one of the carcasses they had gotten from the vet, and she was injecting them with formaldehyde to keep, but this is horrific. She missed and the needle went through the animal and she injected formaldehyde into her own leg.
Okay.
So this is the type of stuff going on while they were making this movie. There's a fun fact, right? Hey, you have the fun fact horn today, by the way.
Yes, I'll bring it out.
Yeah. During the movie.
I won't go crazy with it. That one listener didn't like it. Can we also talk a moment about what I call the anti-score by Tobe Hooper and Wayne Bell, where as opposed to using music to evoke emotional kind of currency out of your audience, what they went for was more of an atmospheric blend of unnatural, uncanny, and natural and organic sounds.
Well, you know what the sounds were.
What? Go give me an idea here, because I'm not sure.
It's very specific. They were giving you the sounds that the cattle heard inside slaughterhouses.
Oh my freaking Christ, that's horrific.
And I think they're manipulating those sounds to a certain degree, but that was their thinking. That's what they were gathering sounds with. And I know there's been a lot of also asking him what they did to come up with the famous picture clicking sound, because that was them too.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and it's weird because Hooper's been very sort of mysterious about it all. I think it was like one of those things he tried to.
And I guess he took it with him to his grave.
There might be somewhere where he states it definitively. I saw interviews where he was asked, and they were like, "Oh yeah," he was like, "Maybe I'll tell you," but they never did, got to it during the interview. So I don't know if it's something he was always. You wonder why he'd be playing coy about it, unless he just didn't want anyone to really ever replicate what they did there. But it's a great sound.
How about that shot? There's one shot in this movie that I don't care if I seen this movie 50 times, it gets me every time. Yeah. Is that nest of Daddy Longlegs?
Yeah.
And not only that, the discordant. It's sort of a matching sound.
Yeah.
But it's a discordant matching sound. Yeah. So it gives you this uncomfortable feeling.
Because it's definitely not the sound of spiders, but it sounds like it kind of would be.
I can hear it in my mind. It's creeping me out.
And the story with that was that they, because you would think was that planned? Or was it just in the house? And it was just in the house. They had gone to that other house there that was supposed to be like Franklin's grandfather's house, the more dilapidated house. They went to it multiple times as they were getting ready to shoot, to prep and scout out the location. And they went there 3 times, I think they said, and each time that nest was there. So they were pretty sure it was going to be there when they got back. So he actually, wrote that into the script, the plan on that. That's why they did it. It wasn't, spontaneous, but it was because that was naturally occurring.
Yeah, it's effective as all F. I'll say that. It creeps me right the F out. Wow. I mean, geez, there's just so many, like you had used the term rabbit holes earlier. This movie has so many rabbit holes.
For me, I don't remember the first time I ever saw it, and I have to say, definitely it was one of those films that I saw it. It disturbed me. I got scared and all that, but I never. There was something about it I never really got. I think until more recently, after becoming more of a horror fan. When I was younger, I think some of the slow setup, the fact, I grew up with the Freddy 3, Freddy and stuff, the very more animated slashers. And, so of course this movie was disturbing, but I was always like, it's not like those other slashers I had seen. And then I kind of took the time as we were doing the series and leading up to this. And then you kind of go like, whoa, there's this moment where it kind of clicks and you're seeing it with these other eyes of like, what they did was so unique that...
I think if the slasher era hadn't kicked off as it did after this movie, and like Michael Myers, Freddy, Jason had never existed, I think this film would more likely be categorized with more brutal art house movies like Last House on the Left. It's only really retroactively after those other characters emerged that Leatherface really took his place where he always belonged, amongst those iconic characterizations of evil.
Yeah.
Yet, again, revisiting this movie, I almost have a hard time launching those words out of my mouth because I have a hard time really attributing evil to Leatherface, as strange as it sounds, because there is a inherent childlike sensitivity and sort of dissonance where he doesn't understand.
He doesn't know he's doing evil.
He's only trying to serve his family.
You would think he might understand or recognize the fear, though, in the victims, but no, he doesn't know any other way, really. He obviously is not an educated person. No. Probably has not seen a lot of...
Like, he's not killing because he's getting some sort of psychosexual thrill out of it, or like, it's not appealing to some sort of familial lineage, like Michael Myers has to just go after his sister, or Jason is, his mother. I don't see like a connection of evil. Now, the thing is, I do see that Leatherface is clearly being used as a weapon by his truly evil family members.
Yeah.
Drayton Sawyer, Nubbins, they are not chaotic neutral, they are chaotic evil.
Yeah.
Those characters are making evil choices. The Hitchhiker understands the difference between good and right and wrong, good and evil. Drayton Sawyer clearly understands. He's, like you said, he vacillates between those kind of frequencies in his persona. Yeah. So he has that core understanding of the impact of his actions.
If you want to think about,
Leatherface does not.
No. You think about it generationally, what's the cook's actual first name?
Drayton.
I don't think I had realized that. Drayton, he's probably less of a crazy person because he was the first brother. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He grew up probably,
he's probably molded himself like his father.
Yeah, like he probably had some normalcy somewhere in his early life, where the other younger ones were probably always raised in some sort of craziness. And of course we don't even know like where their father and mother have gone. And we only have the grandparents around as possible people that raised them, and obviously we know the grandfather had a history of killing people too. So it's weird, right? There's some holes that Hooper doesn't really fill in, and it's up to you.
Nor does he really need to.
And there's some purpose ambiguity.
Exactly.
Because I know it was a few viewings before I realized that Drayton wasn't their father of the Hitchhiker and Leatherface.
He's the oldest brother.
He was written as the brother, but Hooper has said I know it could have read the other way too, and that's fine.
He's clearly the father figure.
Exactly.
And I find it interesting that, and also how I differentiate the brothers' mentality from Leatherface's, is that the brothers never join Leatherface within his own sort of delusions. Like when he's portraying the mother.
He's cleaning up their messes.
Yeah. They're not now thinking that's the mother. The way Ed Gein is always sort of presupposed to have he would talk to his dead mother. He would talk to like the mask, you know, and just like you see like Norman Bates do, for example. That to me shows that the brothers they understand what they're doing. They're reveling in evil.
Yeah.
They're reveling, and they have chips on their shoulders because they've been put out from what they have always only ever known. Their position in society was as these workers within the slaughterhouse. The methodology of creating food that feeds the masses. There has to be someone who's going to do the dirty work so we can all go out to the restaurant and have a steak.
That was the history of their family. They worked at the slaughterhouses. Right. They were the ones who killed the cows.
Other than Leatherface, the brothers have a social chip on their shoulders. Yeah. And so they understand that they are attacking at society in their own way.
And Nubbins, he's the one that's going to the graveyard.
Yes.
He's the one that's digging up, doing that stuff.
He's because I'm sure that Drayton immediately, as Nubbins came of age, I'm sure Drayton immediately recognized that he's a creep. And so
he's always yelling at him. I told you to stay away from that damn graveyard.
Oh, true.
Because that stuff, that's not part of the food. No. That's getting the bones that they're making their furniture out of, all that. Then... you can see that Drayton from the gas station is the one that's taking other victims and sending them to the house.
Yes.
And there must be some, rule Leatherface knows when people show up at the house, you take them out. And that's what all those cars are in the backyard.
Yes,
it's the other victims that they're,
And they call it the vehicle graveyard.
And it's Drayton getting his meat for his famous barbecue. And so Leatherface is just there to clean up their messes and then fill the missing maternal-ish, role there of cooking and prepping and cleaning. And, even when he's the pretty lady later and he gets all made up, he's putting on also like his best suit, a very Texan, he was taught you wear your suit to dinner and stuff.
Yes.
He's only working off of rules and things taught to him. There's no actual identity to the person under there.
Yeah.
You don't get a name. And they toyed with it. They thought about shooting a scene where you see him without the mask. And they just decided, that's too revealing.
The smart idea is never to take that mask off.
Yeah.
It's not a mask in the way Jason wears a mask or Michael wears a mask. That's his face.
Yeah.
That is his face. And he vacillates. I know I've already used that word. Excuse me. It's me. He vacillates between those masks because that's how he moves between the frequencies of his own emotions or finds his way through them through his own disabilities,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So it's interesting how much deeply fascinating psychological, not even subtext, just text there is in the reading of this movie.
You could take any aspect of this movie and
do
talk forever about it, whether it's
Yeah.
technical filming, whether it's acting, whether it's makeup, whether it's just the themes and the writing,
Yes.
whatever you want, you can go on and
Real
on
quick.
and on and on.
It's funny. We just did an episode on John Carpenter's Vampires.
Yeah.
A collaboration we do with James Woods. We were really blessed to be able to do. In that movie, I kept getting hung up on the 1996 film From Dusk Till Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
That vehicle graveyard, I guarantee you that must be where Robert Rodriguez lifted that very famous final shot of From Dusk Till Dawn.
And
where you see all the cars and you realize it's like an Aztec temple behind the Titty Twister bar. It's so awesome.
And Hooper had the original idea there, they just didn't have the money to do it, was to bury the cars, and so you see just all these antennas sticking out of the ground, and maybe just little pieces of the roofs.
You could have just done it with little pieces of car.
Yeah, I think that you were going to see a little bit more than just antenna, and so
I know what you mean.
And it's again, you could. And we will. We're going to talk about a whole lot. I mean, I've never taken so many notes for a movie.
There are so many individual little details and moments that I also want to talk about, but I think we better served when we're watching the movie.
Yeah, and I'm probably not going to get to everything. So definitely I encourage everybody to to do their own research too and watch. There's a lot of great documentaries and makings of and commentary tracks. I watched, and what we're going to
what
be
are we
watching.
What
it's
release?
the 50th anniversary
Show it on camera. Let's take a
from
look.
Dark Sky Entertainment. Just to prove that, just because I do work for Scream Factory, I don't only buy that stuff. This is like a brand new, cleaned up. They literally went back to the film that was running through the camera when they filmed this. And
hold on. Look what it came with. Hold on. Here, hold these for a second for me. Hold on, everyone. It'll be worth it, I hope.
And it's a great set. And it's got a few different commentaries with Tobe Hooper. And it comes in a big old chainsaw case. And it comes with the VHS copy. It's a cool little 50th anniversary set. But the film has never looked or sounded like better. Which is like good and bad. Like you want it to look as good as the filmmakers intended with their, blues being blues and all that. But there is a certain aspect to this film where, over the years, all sorts of different copies and versions were released. And you got all these variations of how washed out it would be, or if the colors were off, or it looked very yellow, or very whatever. And sometimes that also lended to some of the effectiveness of the movie when it wasn't. Isn't it funny pristine,
that it's one of the few movies I can think of that actually almost improves if you watch a degraded copy of it.
I know, it's weird, right?
And in that really great, fascinating documentary, Chain Reactions, you guys should check this out if you haven't already. One of the people that they're interviewing talks about how the version she always watched was obviously recorded from a very washed out print. So you see how just the color schemes, the aesthetic is so different, but it almost has even a more realistic feel the more raw it is.
It's like a sickly color
to
it.
I love that. It's one of the few movies kind of has that, can have that capability of improving while kind of falling apart in a way,
Yeah.
Before we get into the movie, I always love to do this at this part of the episode is, let's take a little bit of a little walk down memory lane, if you will. Let's take a look at some of the movies that were out, horror movies and otherwise, in 1974.
Movies.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
Before we get into just horror, Joe, take us through some of the actual movies of the regular films of 74.
Well, you got Godfather Part 2. Bam.
Banger.
You got two amazing Mel Brooks movies, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein.
Stop right there for a second.
Yeah.
Did that not strike you as insane? That
I know.
Both of those iconic films came out the same year.
Yeah. That's
same director.
It's back when filmmakers could do that.
But how is that possible that Mel Brooks made Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles the same year?
They were released the same year.
But still.
That doesn't mean they were made the same year.
Released the same year?
Yeah, he was busy.
Insane.
Busy and on fire.
Ooh, Roman Polanski's Chinatown.
The Conversation.
Yep. Francis Ford Coppola.
Death Wish. The Man with the Golden Gun.
A Woman Under the Influence, Gina Rowlands, one of the greatest acting performances of all time.
Murder on the Orient Express.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Another film that actually supposedly instigated like fights and little disruptions when it was in the theater.
Great Gatsby.
Parallax View, Warren Beatty, great film.
Towering Inferno.
Well, this is all just Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Black Christmas.
The Longest Yard.
I didn't even realize. Well, I mean, I'm sure it came out afterwards, but what? I don't know Zardoz.
You don't? Sean Connery in a loincloth?
Oh, yes.
In my opinion, it is the most handsome Sean Connery ever looked was actually in Zardoz.
Dark Star. Sumi. So, we got Carpenter starting out.
Oh, my God. Right? Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. Clint Eastwood and Jeff Bridges. What a team up. What else we got there? John Carpenter's Dark Star. You're absolutely right. Dustin Hoffman as Lenny Bruce, the Lenny Bruce
Spielberg's
movie.
Sugarland Express.
Sam Peckinpah's Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Wow, look at this. Look at these movies. It's pretty incredible. Bring out one more. Oh, look, another movie called Vampires.
Vampires with a Y.
Okay. Read the next one.
No, thanks. Okay. And yeah, so some titles, some questionable titles there.
Questionably racist
pretty
titles.
Racist titles, but
apparently
hey,
the white supremacists were making some great cinema in 1974.
But so yeah, there's some bangers there, as you would say.
Let me hit you with a few horror films. 1974.
Please do.
I got a real banger for you. Bob Clark's Black Christmas.
Yep, we just saw that.
Speaking of making two bangers in the same year, Bob Clark released Black Christmas and Death Dream that same year, 1974. Have you ever seen Death Dream?
Nope.
It's gone by a few different titles, I think, but it's about like a Vietnam War soldier who comes back sort of like a zombie. But it's a very kind of metatextual, strange movie. It's really good. A movie that came out that I'm thinking of right now that came out, I don't think I have it in my notes, but I'm pretty sure it came out the same year, ironically enough, was Peter Weir's Picnic at Hanging Rock, which has a lot of aesthetic,
Australian.
Kind of cultural frequency similarities to, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Let's see, we have Blood of Dracula, which was Andy Warhol's Dracula. We have Alan Ormsby's Deranged. Let's see. Ooh, this is a great title. The Hand That Feeds the Dead.
Yeah.
That's a title right there. We got 3 movies that start with The House. Are you ready? The House of Seven Corpses, The House on Skull Mountain, and of course, The House of Whipcord. Whatever that. It's British. Who knows?
Okay, yeah.
Here's an interesting one. I'd never heard of this.
We love you, British people. By the way.
We love you. We do love you. This is an odd one, and I want to throw this one at you. Starring William Shatner, 1974.
Okay.
It's called Impulse. Shatner plays, are you ready for this? A serial killer preying on sexually deprived wealthy widows. Ever heard of that?
No.
I've got to seek this one out.
That's not the one where there's famous footage of him doing some old movie. He's got the makeup over his eyes, like his eyes are gouged out at some point or something like that.
Maybe that's it. I don't know anything about it. I'm going to look into it, though. A movie that I always remember. It's like, for some reason, I wish I could track where it originally got into my psyche. But Larry Cohen's movie, It's Alive, the creepy demonic baby.
Yeah.
That baby from that movie just lives rent-free. Yeah, 1974. Wow. I thought it was like the 80s.
Me too.
That came out.
Yeah.
Sort of blew me away. Here is an interesting thing. It was a Hong Kong martial arts film, but directed by a British director. It was called The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. Another cool title. Now, here's one. There was like a lot of this era, there were a lot of great Italian horror films coming out. One of them was called Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, which I love. But listen to this plot and tell me people weren't taking LSD in 1974. It focuses on 2 protagonists who are harassed by a local police investigator in the English countryside and are implicated in murders committed by zombies who have been brought to life by a farming tool designed to kill insects via ultrasonic radiation. That's the plot of that movie.
Wow.
Very Italian.
I kind of really want to see it now.
Very Italian.
Now that you've read that.
It's one of the most obsequiously bizarre
You've seen
plot lines. No, I've never heard of it.
Okay.
It feels like it literally popped into my notes from another dimension. Oh, here's one. A movie called Madhouse. It was the final time Vincent Price and Peter Cushing ever worked together on screen. 1974. They were still cracking away at it. Here's a title of a movie came out in 1974. Nude for Satan. Nude for Satan. Okay. Here's a stone cold cult classic. If there ever was a true cult classic, Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise.
Okay.
Great movie. Oliver Stone's debut film as a director, it was called Seizure.
Okay.
His very first, I think it was Roger Corman produced film.
He made a movie, I think, called The Hand early on. That was...
This might be the same movie.
Okay.
And this might just be a different title.
Okay, I thought his first movie was called The Hand, and it was like a horror film type thing.
If you guys know, is that the same movie, Seizure and The Hand? I think it might be. Here's, interestingly enough, William Castle's final film. It was called Shanks. It was about a surrealist horror film about a puppeteer who manipulates dead bodies like puppets. But the weird thing is, they tried to build a movie star leading role for a very famous mime, Marcel Marceau. And he did the entire lead performance in mime. And it was like this idea, they thought they were going to turn, like the way that Jim Carrey was on In Living Color, right? And he stands out as this incredible talent. And so they pluck him out and put him in a movie. Yeah. Well, they tried to do that with Marcel Marceau and tried to have a leading performance in a movie that was done in complete mime. Now, it's probably why you've never heard of this movie.
I'm going to skip that one.
If you want to look it out, strangely enough, it was directed by William Castle.
Yeah,
Why
well-
that doesn't surprise me is because it's so gimmicky.
Yeah.
It's so brilliantly gimmicky that I almost want to check that movie out.
I mean, I at least want to, see a scene.
And I had one last one that, again, I thought came out during the 80s. I was sort of shocked by this. Young Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
That's
my number one comedy. That's
of
my
all
favorite.
time?
My favorite. Oh,
no,
yeah.
it is not.
Easily.
You've never told me that.
I love it.
You love that movie?
Oh, my God. Our friend Chris and I, we used to watch that our whole childhood.
I'm going to be totally honest with
We
you.
used to quote it.
The 3 times I've seen it, I couldn't even, I can't understand what's supposed to be funny.
Oh, my God.
Maybe I'm just
I can't.
like another movie like that. Here's another one.
Show's over, folks.
Here's another one that everybody thinks is hilarious. Everybody loves. Oh, it's one of the funniest. One of my favorite funny movies. I cannot figure out why it's funny. Is Monty Python's Holy Grail.
Yeah, I'm with
or
you.
Most Monty Python.
I like
What
Monty
is so
Python. I don't go gaga over it. And I should say, I'm actually not a huge Mel Brooks guy, but Young Frankenstein. Is just comedy genius in my opinion. Gene Wilder was never funnier.
Your favorite comedy
all
ever.
time?
Not Back to the Future.
I wouldn't call that a comedy. No.
So what would you call Back to the Future?
A lot of movies.
I guess a comedic. It's sort of like
fantasy.
Yeah.
Or,
It's actually sort of a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Wow, it's kind of weird to.
Well, the script is considered like a perfect script. The first movie.
Where would it be in the video store? Where was Back to the Future?
Family?
Would it be?
I don't know.
Where the hell would they put?
Drama?
Where the hell would you put Back to the Future?
Yeah.
I'm suddenly realizing I can't.
You can put it in sci-fi. You can put it in family.
Sci-fi,
you can
maybe.
put it in. I don't know.
It is a time travel movie,
Yeah,
so sci-fi does work. I always thought it was a comedy.
Huh? No, I mean, maybe to some people.
Wow. I wonder if there's a Marty McFly emoji. That would be great. There probably is nowadays. Go ahead, throw it up there.
Flux capacitor.
No, I'll tell you what. In honor of that horrifying shot from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, if you have listened to this episode to this point, do us a favor. Comment with the spider emoji.
There you go.
The spider emoji. Should we say a few thank yous real quick?
Yes,
Because
we have a lot.
We should jump into why we're all actually gathered here today. We all are here in Joe's basement, of course, to watch Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel's seminal 1974 film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And I want to say, and I won't be bringing it up all season long, but I'll say for the first episode here of the season, one of the big changes is we have no film on our screen or being heard for copyright reasons. But if you are watching on YouTube, you can look at the screen and there's a little countdown to when you can start the movie yourself at home.
If you want to watch
it should line
along.
up, pretty well
Right.
if you want to watch along, if you really want to have a reference to sometimes some of the things we're talking about.
Yeah.
So
that will be on screen, and you can always just pause the episode and get yourself ready with your popcorn and your sody pop.
Yep.
And what are we having today? We're having cherry float Coca-Cola.
Yes. My son picked out the flavor.
I have to say, it's good. I don't usually drink dark sodas anymore, but when I come to Joe's, I splurge a little. So I just want to say, want to say, here we are. We're starting season 4, our 4th consecutive season, 35 episodes in, and
it wasn't supposed to go this long.
I mean, it's funny to think. Originally, the idea was let's just make a commentary for the first Halloween movie.
Yeah.
But by the time Joe had taken all the initiative and effort of building a whole YouTube channel, it looked sort of silly just having one video.
And then we're like, we'll just finish Halloween.
Yeah.
And then everyone towards the end is like, well, what are you doing next?
Now
I was like, what?
Okay.
So here we are,
Yeah,
4
but
seasons later.
We're in our 4th year for our listeners in the present. We're in our 4th year of producing this show, and it has absolutely been and continues to be my favorite creative endeavor of my entire life. The community that has sort of developed here alongside the creation of these episodes is so special to me and so dear to my heart. And seeing that there's people who have made friends with other people just based on meeting each other through listening to these episodes, that's like the greatest reward Joe and I could ever endeavor to receive from our efforts in creating this show. That you guys are kind and supportive enough to give us, a few hours of every month to share with us these movies down here in Joe's basement. It means the absolute world to me, and I know it means the absolute world to Joe as well. And I just want you to know, and I'm sure Joe as well, that we sincerely appreciate you. Your support of our creativity here at Haddonfield Radio is the fuel, it's the wind that at our backs that keeps us moving, keeps our head down, as we keep laying down the track as the train's rolling up behind us. But we love you guys so much. We appreciate every single solitary one of you. And I'm going to make a deal with you right here and now, starting season 4. If I ever see you, yes, you, in public, you can have a choice. A firm handshake or a frickin' kiss on the cheek. You choose. I make this handshake guarantee to you right now. Season 4, Haddonfield Radio. You heard it here first. Am I right?
You go with the handshake, everybody.
Yeah. I do have a bit of a cootie. So,
Coke breath.
What do you want to say about it?
No, just thank you, everybody. It's amazing. Like Christian said, we couldn't have done it without you guys, and we are sort of achieving more than we ever thought we could with this channel. It's been so much fun. I'm so proud of it.
And it's literally all thanks. Literally all thanks to
guys.
every single one of
you.
you.
The best part is you guys, and having this relationship with you guys, and being able to talk to you guys, and new friends,
making new friends.
It's wonderful.
Learning so much from our listeners. That to me is always one of the most profoundly moving experiences of this whole thing is how much that I've picked up and learned literally from our listeners. And I've often said over the years, I always know in my mind that a lot of the people that are listening to us talk about these movies probably know more about them than we do. And Joe and I have always said, going all the way back to episode 1, we are not experts. We're not trying to position ourselves in any way like that. We are just two fans, just like anybody else, of these wonderful movies and of movie making in general and the history of movies. And we're just sharing our humble perspectives like anybody else. So, and it's interesting. Fan commentary is something that really anybody can jump in and do. If you have an inkling to want to create for YouTube, I'm telling you, if you love movies, anyone can kind of jump in and begin the process of getting better and better and better at fan commentary. All you have to do is be willing to share your perspective and your heart and your feelings, and good or bad, on whatever you're talking about. It certainly is something that you, like any other skill, you got to develop with time. But I've always thought of how wonderful it is that fan commentary is something that almost anyone can do. Anyone can try. So if you're
almost everybody's a fan of something, and so by default, anyone can do this.
Just sharing your perspective in a humble and open way is something anybody can start and do if you want to express yourself and be creative. It's a great place to start. And Joe and I take it very seriously, and we put our heart and soul into these episodes. We would never release anything if we didn't think it was the best it can be. And our goal going forward, I promise you this, to always thank you. Our goal going forward is to try to always exceed your expectations of what we have to offer here at Haddonfield Radio, right?
You are correct.
So we love you. Thank you so much. Your support means the absolute world to us.
All right. Well, without further ado, should we start the movie?
We'll jump in. It is Tobe Hooper's 1974 Stone Cold classic, The Texas Chainsaw or Chainsaw Massacre.
So like I said, we're watching the brand new cleaned up 50th anniversary version of this film, which it does look great, I have to say. But we have the famous scroll here, of course.
I mean, it's almost funny right from the jump. It's an iconic moment of this movie and I like that it's in the same yellow that Star Wars eventually uses in a scroll.
But it's interesting. A lot of people think that they're being told here that it's a true story, but it doesn't say there at all. It just says
and also
this is like the story, but it doesn't say this is true necessarily.
The day that they claim this event happened was after the point when they were filming, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
So
and of course, that's
Of
John
course it's not true.
Larroquette. John Larroquette doing the voiceover. And he was famously paid one joint.
I love that.
One marijuana
That's
joint.
That's all they could part with, apparently, for his work.
And, he has said he has never watched the film. And that was like as of 2008, I think, was the interview I saw.
Wow.
And then, of course, he gets brought back in the remake.
Yeah. And I think a
do it
video
again.
game, too.
Yes.
Potentially. I could be wrong about that. I think I read that somewhere. I don't know much about video games. Sorry, guys. But, we were talking before we started recording real quick about the idea of based on a true story.
Yeah.
In a more esoteric sense, it's almost like Hooper and Henkel were basically referring to the sense that the true story of the degradation of culture.
Yeah, of course.
It's not that this event
America was
happened,
changing rapidly at this point.
but there was sort of a rot at the center, a cancer at the center of American life, or even in the world. A darkness was forming.
All these Polaroid photos that you're seeing were done after principal photography. These were done on that human skeleton they had, but it wasn't Bob Burns at this point. It was somebody else that and I think a lot of it was Tobe Hooper too himself. They like wadded up, just materials, and they kind of made these, decomposing images themselves. And again, like I was saying earlier, it's kind of like the setup of like, here,
God,
look what you're getting into.
That is a stunning image.
That is also the human skeleton reworked again.
There is, to me, nothing creepier than in real life. If you ever see in real life, in true crime or whatever, a body kind of laying in the breeze, the way the hair kind of moves in this intense stillness of a dead body.
Yeah.
The juxtaposition of that little micro movement, to me, is so creepy. This, to me, has to be one of the most beautifully composed, in its own way, beautifully composed images in film history, in my opinion.
This was done post-production. This is not the same graveyard that the kids drive to. This was done after the fact, after editing, when he kind of realized he needed a different way to get into the film. And also, I think he was trying to kind of, again, tell people, like, he's not making any bones about it, no pun intended here, that, like, this is what the film, this is a taste of it. Like, are you be prepared? Either walk out now.
This is what we're doing.
This is the moment. You walk out or you don't walk out, right? So it's
there is something just absolutely striking and mythic about this image.
Yeah.
That's just, and then it goes into sun flares,
solar flares, stock
solar
footage,
flares.
The sun is a huge.
Is communicating.
Oh yeah,
something.
the sun is definitely something thematically. Whether there's something bigger than them just saying, let's use the sun, and the moon to a degree. They also switches to the moon.
There's multiple shots of the moon.
Yeah, so I think something about that is what was consciously, used as a transitionary element within the story visually.
But also, I think coming out of the 60s, it's in a lot of like the detail in this film speaks to the idea of horoscope as astrology, the occult.
Well, yeah, one of the first original titles for this movie that wasn't used was Saturn in Retrograde.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because other people, you hear Saturn mentioned on the radio when they're in the van. Certainly the symbol that the hitchhiker leaves on the door. Some people have implied that it is a rune of Saturn. Some people have compared it to the Cult of Thorn rune, actually. But anyway.
Well, I think I heard them say during one of the commentaries that there was more talk about that stuff within the van footage.
It's in the original script.
Yeah, there was supposed to be a lot more of that. And I do wonder if things like that stock footage of the solar flares being used was maybe decided after the fact, after they had experienced this extreme heat during the entire filming of this movie. You know what I mean? Like, the sun just almost killed them. You know what I mean? And they're now using it almost like a visual thing within their movie to help maybe just that sort of subliminal idea, because it was so hot, especially in the van and everything else.
Well, it's interesting. We were talking before we started recording. It's one of the things that really stands out to me in this film is how much of the horror is set in daylight, in broad daylight, or like magic hour daylight. Right?
helps with the unsettling feeling.
It's so unsettling
Yeah.
because it's right there in plain sight. The camera is depicting it in a very standard, in a very straightforward way, from a very objective perspective. And it's just laid out, just like you were saying, like from that very opening shot, it's saying, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is where we're going. We are not going to deviate from that path. So you're either with it or you aren't.
So in this scene right here, this actor, Paul Partain, as Franklin, right there in his pocket, his shirt pocket, is his paycheck. He had refused to continue filming or finish
paycheck
filming.
for filming?
Yeah, well, again, finances were shady on this movie, and it got to a point where they owed him, and he was like, no, I'm not, going to keep filming until I get my check. So they gave it to him right there, and then they were able to keep filming.
And now that paycheck is somewhere in the tall grass,
He
apparently.
was also scared to do that, so he goes, I'll do it when you do it. So then Tobe Hooper rode the wheelchair down, and then Daniel Pearl. The next thing you know, the whole crew was doing it. They were having fun, and he was like, all right, give me the damn wheelchair. I'll go down it, and they filmed
Also,
it,
do you notice Paul Partain has a horrible, rug burn wound on his arm?
Probably because of that,
Probably
yeah.
from going down that hill. It actually, you just saw it in the previous shot. It's pretty gnarly.
This van that they ended up using, so they had two vans available to them. One had to be used for the actors to be in while filming, and the other van would be sort of like their grip truck. And of course, they decided to use the bigger van for filming with the characters here, and the smaller one is the grip truck. And so this van that the kids have was actually one of the sound guys' vans. This was that type of production. It was all hands on deck. They didn't have money for their, go buy vans, but to use the crew's vans.
I mean, look at the level of realism in these faces. And I absolutely get such a nostalgic, warm feeling from 1970s filmmaking anyway. But this just hits me right in that spot, doesn't it? It has such an anchor of realism to it.
Well, it does not feel rehearsed at all. These
No.
people are just doing it.
And yet these are all, careful camera moves. So it was. And yet it feels so natural and organic that it just drags you down that river towards where you're going. It just drags you into complacency with the normalcy. These are situations and faces you would see in your normal life. So it's almost hypnotic.
The film, for most of filming, it was being filmed under the title just Leatherface. And then
There was one even called, they were thinking about calling it Stalking Leatherface.
Yeah, and it was another title they were thinking of was Head Cheese. But while they were actually filming, most of the time it was being called Leatherface. And then when Tobe decided to make that change, in the title, it was he caught a lot of crap from everybody else. They didn't really get it. They thought it was a little too maybe on the nose, and of course Gunnar Hansen was like, hey, wait, he thought his character was going to be the star of the movie, the title of the movie, and now it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But
had you read anywhere? I actually had a hard time kind of finding this bit of information where the name Leatherface came from, or who first uttered that. I think I've read somewhere along the line that in that car ride home from the department store, Tobe Hooper had thought of that.
Maybe
the image, the silhouette of the character, and the name, and he had a dentist when he was a child, I guess, that told him this story that for a Halloween prank, he had taken the face off of a real body and made a mask out of it. Did you read this?
No.
And it startled and frightened Tobe Hooper so much that imagery stayed with him all his life.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Those cows were filmed after the fact.
Anyway, go ahead.
They were added in post, sort of afterwards. They
What? Oh, wow.
There was a lot of after he kind of assembled it, he went and had to do a few little things to even it out. It seems like
Look on the inside of his arm. Do you see Paul Partain's arm? It looks like he really hurt himself.
And so, Paul Partain pretty much stayed in character the entire time that they were filming.
Oh, he must have been a blast.
Yeah,
to be around.
Gunnar Hansen, man, he was very vocal about saying how much he couldn't stand this guy and was happy to kill him off. In an event, and then down the line, they became good friends years later and all that. But he had to explain to him later that he was stating character. He was so afraid that he would lose Franklin once he kind of found it, that he just became that whiny guy the whole time. And in fact, he also didn't get along with Sally Hardesty. I mean, Marilyn Burns, who plays Sally Hardesty. Their bickering is kind of natural because they really did not, get along well at the time because of his staying in character.
The interesting thing I wanted to say, all through my life, I've always remembered that, at least I always assumed that mark on the hitchhiker's face was blood.
Oh, it's a birthmark.
I never realized until this month, as stupid as I sound, I never realized that's a birthmark.
Yeah.
And of course, facial birthmarks have occult symbolism and have symbolism within witchcraft as well. So I find it interesting that Tobe Hooper added that detail to the character.
Well, I remember...
And the way he burns the photograph and it
this
turns
whole
into
thing,
almost like a magic trick.
Yeah, he's got a lot of weird stuff with him. But again, he's, Tobe Hooper, the brilliance of the scene, he's kind of giving it to you right away. And this is like one of the more bloodier scenes, actually, where he just cuts his own hand. Because we think about it, and I heard someone else breaking it down like this. Like, when the audience sees someone getting killed with the chainsaw, they cannot relate to that. Nobody knows what that feels like. No one's had that happen, been able to relate what that felt like. But you know what it's like to get a cut on your hand.
Oh, yeah, it's horrifying.
So it's almost more horrifying to watch this guy cut his own hand than anything else in the movie because you can relate to it. So, people can talk about how it takes a while before you kind of get to the killing and the horror, but there's some pretty, uncomfortable moments leading up to all the bigger stuff,
And I think it's interesting that Franklin sort of mirrors the hitchhiker in the same way, in a weird way, he mirrors Leatherface later. And if you notice, Paul Partain actually begins mimicking the blowing the raspberries like the hitchhiker does, and then later he does it. He's mimicking and fiddling with the knife the way the hitchhiker has his blade. Yeah. And then who are the two characters that bleed with each other? It's is Franklin and the hitchhiker. Yeah. And it's almost sort of can be looked at as a bit of like an occult, almost like a blood ritual in a way, or like blood brothers, some sort of transference or connection.
And, Tobe Hooper likes to claim, that there was very, very little blood, few ounces of blood needed for this whole movie. And that was kind of part of the deal he was making with the MPAA. He was in constant communication with them. He really wanted to try and get, a PG rating, which at the time, there was less, there wasn't like X and stuff, these other ratings. Yeah.
It's gnarly.
And so they sort of made a deal about it really depends on how much blood we see, and whatnot. And so he went back and forth with them and made but at the end of the day, they just couldn't, they had to give him an R. They couldn't do the PG,
I like that the hitchhiker just gently returns the blade back to Franklin. Yeah. And Paul Partain plays that really, really beautifully, actually. But oh my God, I'm telling you, man, Edwin Neal, he kills it in this sequence. Yeah, I swear, as weird as this sounds, I've actually met people in my lifetime that at least one or two people that remind me of the hitchhiker. This type of personality, this type of insanity, this sort of lunacy is a better word for it. The hitchhiker to me is what I think a lot of people, where the term lunatic comes from. People used to go out and howl at the moon. You know who used to go out and howl at the moon? Ed Gein. No. Ed Gein was literally a lunatic, a ghoul and a lunatic. And so a lot of the pastiche that comes out of the Ed Gein incident also kind of falls onto the character of the hitchhiker played by Edwin Neal here, who I never knew until recently his name is Nubbins.
Yeah, right.
Nubbins.
And he's basing his character on it. He had the actor had a nephew, a real eccentric nephew, and that's what he's basing his whole character on.
See it. Yeah.
I have that same exact camera.
Oh wow!
I do. Yeah, it was.
Now it's like Franklin. Everybody is sort of disturbed and unsettled by the hitchhiker, but Franklin is sort of also mesmerized by him. To Franklin, it's almost like Franklin's like watching him like he's watching a movie or he's watching a television show. Yeah. He's invested in the kind of colorful character that he's seeing in front of himself, even though clearly this guy just cut himself.
Yeah.
He's unsettled.
Yeah.
But he did hand the blade back to Franklin gently.
Cleaned it off.
So
right.
I like the way Paul Partain plays it with this sort of like awe, a little aw shucks awe.
There's a little subtext too with the fact that the hitchhiker has a camera.
Well, he's kind of obsessed with imagery, photographs.
And it's back to Hooper. It's Hooper, the importance of sort of film, of imagery-based media. Mm-hmm. It's something he uses a lot in his other films. If you watch,
absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely right. And also, you notice the first two photographs the hitchhiker shows them is of butchered meat, right?
Right.
Now he has his third photograph. What will it eventually become? Butchered meat.
Yep.
He's telling them what's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
He's actually telling them what is coming.
Yep. And
and this to me, not to interrupt you, it just reminds me so much of almost like the way a magician does a magic trick with like literal smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. He's got like gunpowder there or something.
And the way he performs it feels like performative, like a magician.
Yeah.
So to me, I think Tobe Hooper is trying to encode some of the visualization here along with some sort of occult feeling. I'm not saying it's a direct thing.
No, but they want you to get that feel from this character.
Which a lot of, in the occult angle, I only kind of lean on it a lot with this movie because part of what was being looked at as disturbing the flower power generation was occult.
Yeah.
And then, of course, years later, you come and you get the satanic panic.
Well, sort of the opposite end of her horoscope stuff, which is a little more in line with the flower power, like you said, stuff.
Now, what this definitely is that he's doing here is what seems like, in a slaughterhouse term, is like branding.
Yeah.
Like, he's sending a signal on this van to tell other family members down the line that he's targeted these people as prey.
Yeah.
Now, other people look at that exact symbol. He kind of carefully adheres to the side of the van with his blood, basically being the rune of Saturn.
Oh.
Connected to what you hear on the radio, the page that she has marked in that book of astrology. So Tobe Hooper was clearly trying to say something about Saturn, but astrology playing into the corruption within the flower power generation. Not that there's anything corrupt in astrology, but moving more towards the dark side of that, like the witchcraft side of it, which was kind of weaning its way in with the hippies. Look at the Manson. The Manson family is a perfect example of that.
So it was ridiculously hot in this van. Daniel Pearl and Tobe Hooper are also in there, and they were filming with just available light. They weren't putting any lights in there. So if you look, all the van windows are kind of blown out. And that was done just because Daniel Pearl was a new cinematographer, and he opened up his iris all the way, and he went for it, and so it was unintentional. He talked about wishing kind of there was some detail back there, but really at the end of the day, it helps sell this idea of the heat, the sun, and it was
there. It is,
yeah, and it's like just because they had to film practically. And, like I said, they were filming on 16 millimeter, but they were using a slow stock, which means it needed a lot of light. And they did that so it would have the least amount of grain possible, because they knew they would have to blow it up to 35 because that's what theaters had, and that would always add grain. And so to try and make this look as good as it could, they had to use this film, which required a lot of light. But of course, they did not have a lot of lights.
I love that the sign actually says, "We slaughter barbecue."
Right.
We slaughter barbecue. And then the Coca-Cola sign above it. That to me is totally Tobe Hooper.
Yeah.
Like that is such a Tobe Hooper detail in my opinion, that adding Coca-Cola above that to this place that's selling human remains.
And I believe
is hilarious.
This weird guy here was just a friend of Marilyn Burns. That they got to come over.
But do you think the character, is he one of their family members, do you think?
I feel like, he must be like somehow related and in on it. Or I don't know about related, but he's in on it, or or
not
I don't know. It is weird, right? There's this other guy.
These aren't all these like urbane people. Everybody would probably know. Like the people that we saw milling around the cemetery would probably know these people that work up at the gas station.
Yeah.
The family who works, or the barbecue in the gas station. That family.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me, this general sense that they're almost allowed to just carry on as long as it doesn't spill out into the wider populace.
Yeah.
Clearly, it must be known what they're up to in a way. Do you think?
It seems like you would. Some people would.
Jim Seidow is so damn good in this movie.
And it's interesting, like, he's telling them basically, get the hell out of here. Like,
yeah.
he's kind of giving them an out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that they're low on gas, and he doesn't have gas, which ties into when now think about when we get to the house and there's the generators running on gas. That's why the gas station doesn't have any gas, because they're using it at their house to power their house. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yep, I got it.
And it's also obviously, metaphorically, it's here because of the gas shortage going on at the times. It's definitely, like they say, no film is made in a vacuum. It's always going to somehow reflect the world around it, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Right. I like that now, again, after he's come into contact with the hitchhiker, now suddenly Franklin is becoming a little more aggressive with that knife himself. He's carving into the actual van. He even gets kind of castigated for it in a little bit. He's getting he's kind of tempting the idea of cutting himself because he was so mesmerized by it.
He's all freaked out now. And of course, his frustration is going to build as everyone else is starting to have fun, and he's not, as well.
I just happened to notice, like, as I was watching it leading up to this, the amount of actual little wounds that are all over Paul Partaine's body, it looks like. Now, it could have just been from all this rough filming, or I wonder if he was methody kind of jerking around himself with that knife and playing weird with that knife.
I think it's supposed to be from his fall earlier.
Yeah, okay.
The character is supposed to...
But that looks real. It looks like it's actually on his body.
But it could be makeup, right? Who knows?
Like, to me, that definitely looks like a rune of some kind on the side there. It's not exactly similar to the Saturn symbol that would most likely correspond with it. It's not exact, but I can see the similarities. I think it's more just meant to be a branding that this van might as well be carrying cattle.
Yeah. There's some great photos of Tobe Hooper painting that on the van.
And it's a much more clearer version in those photos.
Yeah, it's like he does it like clean, and then it's sort of they add the drips after or something.
Okay, so what you think happened, that makes a lot of sense. I was wondering if maybe they just did one version, erased it, and did a more rougher version. Because the pictures, the one in those photographs, in those vintage
I'm
stills,
sure he did a few passes,
it looked much more oriented as like a rune.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was cleaner for sure.
Much, much cleaner.
Marilyn Burns, her outfit here, the white pants and the purple sweater. The white was chosen so she would stick out during the night scenes running through the woods. And she, at one point, so that, she had like 3 or 4 copies of that whole outfit that they bought from a store. And then she took them to a laundromat to wash them, and they were stolen. And so she had to go back to the store, and they only had one left of the sweater, right?
Yep.
And it was like a size too big, but she had to use it, and that's what she had to wear for most of the movie because someone stole all the other copies of the sweater, Now, what's interesting here is the juxtaposition in real life. The Sawyer house, Leatherface house, is right across the street. It's kind of where the camera is. And this house just happened to be there when they went up to sky out the Leatherface house location. And so they're right across the street from one another. But they're, not supposed to be in this world. But it's right over the ridge there, anyway.
I just wanted to quickly throw out, I said I was going to do this periodically through the episode. One of the great pieces of analysis I read on this movie is all about the occult symbolism and imagery encoded all throughout this movie. And if you want to look it up, the author's name is Nat Bremer, Bremer. It's definitely worth Googling if you love this movie. He wrote a brilliant article just about the occult significance that you can kind of derive from this film definitely informed a lot of my thinking. So I wanted to give credit where credit is due. I also want to say is, wow, Franklin's walking around essentially with a piece of human flesh in his mouth like
sausage,
a cigar.
Yeah.
He's the first act of cannibalism you see in this movie is one of our protagonists.
Unintentional, yeah.
Not one of the monsters, not one of the
because they come out of the gas station, hey, saying, we got you some barbecue.
And it happens to look like a dingus.
Well, there's that too.
It happens to look like a dingus.
It was brought up during the commentaries.
A dingy wingy.
So all these actors also kind of, to prep and be in character, they only referred to each other by their characters' names and stayed away from, Gunnar Hansen the whole time too. You know what I mean? They kept their distance like the characters would.
Right.
So,
I read that. Yeah. Tobe Hooper was very specific about who was allowed to sort of mingle around with each other when they weren't working, and he wanted to keep some separation in his directorial control. Yep. And it does work wonders. And that's always a very smart way of doing things when you're doing these types of films with antecedent characters like that. Yeah. To just, like, remember, I think it was Friday the 13th Final Chapter that Ted White purposefully stayed away from all the cast members. Yep.
There's your spiders.
That shot. The way it goes in on the daddy long legs, then in on him, then back into the daddy long legs is like, now you're in his subjective perception of it, which blends to the audience's. It's horrifying.
And all this camera work here, the handheld kind of shakiness, it feels so, I don't know, uncinematic in a way that your guard is down. It's like you're just watching home movies in a way almost. And you can kind of see the limitations of their lighting and their camera and all that, how blown out their background had to be.
I think it has a really...
Oh, yeah. But it was unintentional. Like, that was just a product of their limitations, But it does add to it.
It works because it suggests the heat. It suggests the...
Exactly.
Like, the oppressive sunlight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that... sunlight is almost universally used as a symbol of life, as a symbol of... It's almost always used like a positive symbol.
Right.
It's so interesting to me, even in the dynamic of setting a lot of the violence in daylight, a lot of the horror in daylight. It's interesting, the inversion, using the sun more as a symbol of evil, a symbol of corruption, of degradation, that the heat is oppressive. And stifling and suffocating, as opposed to life-giving.
It literally was too to this crew. So there's no exaggeration, Yeah,
it gives an effect. It kind of bleeds off the screen. The way when you watch like John Carpenter's The Thing, you feel like you're frigid, like you're cold.
Yes.
It just comes across. It's just this oppressive feeling of that just comes right out of the screen.
Supposedly, Guillermo del Toro became a vegetarian after watching this film.
I actually read it's the film most categorically associated with converting people off of eating meat. And yes, Guillermo del Toro, he never ate meat again after watching this. Same with Takashi Miike.
Another weird side effect of this movie was Edwin Neal was told by the state troopers in Texas that the amount of hitchhiking crimes and hitchhikers went way down after this movie. Because,
that makes sense.
And they credit it to this movie. That's why they went and told him.
But see, crazy. Like how Franklin right there is blowing the raspberries, just like, of course, like the hitchhiker.
And I remember in a commentary when somebody asked him during it, like, was that you? And he's like, no, that was scripted. That was Toby told me to blow those raspberries,
It's interesting. I don't know a ton of detail about it. I only sort of found this a couple nights ago, but I guess a lot, if not all, of the funding for this film came from the proceeds, the profits from the infamous film Deep Throat. And essentially, a lot of that was funded by the mob, the Colombo crime, associates of the Colombo crime family.
Yeah, the company, when you look up this movie, the Bryanston Distribution Company that is listed there. That was the mafia owned company that was laundering massive amounts of money from the Deep Throat movie.
And Deep Throat, I think, was intended to be a money laundering operation in and of itself.
Yeah.
And so, of course, real money is made from it, and some of those proceeds went into the $140,000, $150,000 that this film needed to become a reality.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But there was like lawsuits after the fact where the cast and crew members sort of sued for extra money and won.
There was a lot of shenanigans in the beginning where the cast and crew thought that they were getting a certain percentage of, the sales of the film, but they didn't realize it was only based on what Vortex, which is the company that Hooper started with Henkel to make this movie, on what they owned, and they only owned 50% of the movie, so they were only getting a portion of 50% of the movie, and so all this stuff went down, but eventually, and there's a whole story there. We could go on forever about them swindling each other. But eventually, New Line Cinema... Well, eventually, Bryanston goes out of business.
Yep.
They get caught for all their
fraudulent
activities. And New Line comes in and takes over distribution rights to the film. And then they make things better.
There's the sun again, by the way.
With the actors, and they got them better deals and everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating little bit of the production lore of this movie.
Now,
rabbit hole.
Right here is also where there's... See this scene right here? These shots? These are remnants from a whole cut scene where this couple comes upon this, and there's a bigger conversation that happens there as they're trying to investigate this shredded tent and the watch. But he said it just didn't.
It just deterred from the general.
It just didn't play out right the way he wanted it to.
The little bit of visual data there that really stands out to me and always sticks in my mind is the image of the pocket watch with the spike going through it.
Yeah.
The idea of destroying time or stopping time in place.
Yeah, it just has no place here.
Like in other words, this family exists out of the flow of time, and that's what has corrupted their spirits and turned them into monsters.
It's such a beautiful setting too. All these shots of the daisies and the grass fields and the beautiful skies.
And yet it is a landscape supporting evil.
And these cars here.
It's just another really creative inversion.
Those cars were the cruise cars, just that they used, and they again supposed to represent victims of the Sawyer family. Which fun fact.
Hold on. There we go.
So their last name here is Sawyer, which traditionally, think about it, has the word saw. It was a name given to tradesmen who made their money using saws, and so
can I throw a little additional fun fact building on that? Strangely enough, there are cannibalistic murderous families that exist in both American and international history, of course. One of them, if you really want to go down an interesting rabbit hole, look up the Bloody Benders of Kansas. They were a murderous communal murderous family that were also cannibals. And one of the most famous stories that may have very well inspired the name Sawyer and this family were actually called the Sawney Bean family of the Scottish Highlands, Sawney. And they were these nomadic traveling Scottish family that were murderers and cannibals and marauders, like road marauders. Very, very similar in behavior as what you see in the Sawyers, the depiction of the Sawyers here. Very creepy stuff. If you ever want to get creeped out, look up either of those stories.
Next time we see the swing, you should take note that what they made it out of were old railroad ties, those big, huge beams, because that is a swing made for Leatherface. And it needs to hold his weight. He's so simple as a kid
with his
that the family made him a swing.
Oh my God!
And it had to be heavy enough to, or strong enough to hold his weight. So that's why if you look at it, they made that for the movie. That wasn't there with the house.
See, it's beautiful detail like that that just brings everything to life.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that.
And the teeth that was real human teeth that a dentist provided Bob Burns.
Yep, I heard that. Okay, can I just say something right here?
Like, is it? Do people? Only in horror movies do people actually just walk into other people's houses, right?
It's such a trope, though, of horror, though.
Like,
it's such a trope.
When they're not in distress. Sometimes I get it when, like, the guy's right behind you. All right. But right now, no one's in any danger. Why are you just walking into someone's house?
So the, again, going back to that documentary, Chain Reactions, one of the people that gives their perspective is an Australian film critic called Alexandra Heller Nicholas. And she talks so brilliantly about how this door is sort of representative of like the hell mouth from Hieronymus Bosch, and sort of the red behind it, the animal bones already inside the gaping maw of this house itself. Once you pass into that hell gate, you never come back out. And then the idea that Tobe Hooper then uses that imagery again in Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
Look at this shot.
Beautiful shot, yeah.
And again, look at the red of her. You just saw the red of that door, and now look at it matching the red of her pants.
But also, what they're
shorts.
also trying to show you is that exposed back of hers. That's about to get the hook.
Absolutely true.
That was kind of one of the big focuses, why they wanted to do that shot, you know? And when Leatherface comes out and hits that guy, he's squealing like a pig, again, because he doesn't he doesn't talk, right? And he's confused, and it's sort of like a reaction because he just took out a guy. But Gunnar Hansen actually went to a friend's farm and hung out with pigs for a while to learn to do that squeal. That's really him squealing.
Oh my!
And he went and
really?
hung out with pigs to do that.
You know, it's interesting. His performance in this, you know who I kept thinking about was James Jude Courtney's performance in Halloween, the David Gordon Green Halloween movies.
Really, yeah.
James Jude Courtney is such a classically trained actor that the reason why Michael Myers is so vivid in those three films is because of the performance imbued by James Jude Courtney. Gunnar Hansen, he was a poet, a writer,
and for how little they were getting paid, it's amazing how much he put into it. You know, he was supposed to only be there for like 2 weeks. He ends up shooting for 4. You know,
no, he absolutely imbues Leatherface with a total chilling reality based on that level of methodical detail that he was, kind of synthesizing within himself to kind of bring this character to life as vividly as possible.
Fun fact.
Hold on.
When he played Leatherface, this was the first and only time he ever shaved his beard off.
Only time ever?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He never shaved it again after this.
This connects back to the beginning of the movie. It connects back to that incredibly iconic shot of the, I guess, the body artwork that the brothers have created on that grave.
Yeah.
It's a form of necrophilia in that it is a turning something corrupt and something rotten into something beautiful.
Yep.
It becomes a compulsion for some of these people.
It's interesting. Like it's animals mixed with the humans. Like there's no difference to them.
There is absolutely no difference.
You see their human bones mixed with animal bones just as equally.
But they see themselves also as no different from the animal kingdom. And I think that's why Tobe Hooper intersperses so much discordant animal noise once you're inside this house, because he's making a statement that there's no separation between the wildlife, the livestock, and the human creatures that are living on this property. And they're not just quickly murdering their victims, they're reducing them to their animalistic forms before they slaughter them. They're taking normal thinking, spirited humans and reducing them into grunting animals much like themselves.
This is horrifying.
It's truly horrifying.
This is horrifying.
And
right
again,
there,
broad
where you're almost
daylight.
out, yeah.
And again, the farmhouse reminds me of Night of the Living Dead. The only difference is the inverse. You don't want what's on the outside in Night of the Living Dead. You don't want what's on the inside in Texas Chainsaw.
They added 3. This is
the teeth of the monster. The teeth of the house.
How casually he just does this. Like it's just she's
it's
just
a slab
piece
of
meat.
beef.
Yep. It's not the first person he's done that to. You know what I mean? He knows what to do to shut her up. And so he can finish dismembering this guy. And so
I really see it literally as the teeth of the house.
They had only one saw. It worked every time for them. It was beautiful. And it's real. It's live. So, Gunnar would have to really talk to these actors and be like, do not move your head. Trust me, I'm not going to hit you. But if you move, I'll kill you because I can't see like through these little peepholes. So right now, he is actually moving a live chainsaw, right by the actor's head and stuff because there's no stunt doubles. There's no fake bodies.
Well, I had actually read that a couple different times when they were filming sequences, because he couldn't really see through the mask, Gunnar Hansen would be running and would trip and fall and would have to have the presence of mind of hurling the chainsaw out in front of himself.
Close. What happened was he actually tripped and fell on his back, so it went in the air one time.
Oh my God.
And he didn't know where it was, so he rolled onto his side, and then it fell right next to him.
Oh my God.
And Tobe Hooper's talked about it too. He was saying how intense it was, and
because you can't really fake a chainsaw. You just have to do the chainsaw.
And especially with them, they didn't have a props department or effects guys to make different versions of it with and without a chain, a chain that spun, and so they just and it was like they borrowed it and they had to like give it back to the guy they borrowed it from too. It was, and I think they removed the choke on it to make it a little more intense, but. Yeah, all this bickering supposedly it's like really real with them. They did not like each other. I was going
to say it feels really real,
and I think it's more because he stayed in character and always whined. Because later you would hear these guys on commentaries, and they all seem friendly.
I've always had this weird theory in my mind about Franklin that he absolutely can get himself up out of that wheelchair and walk around. He reminds me of that. Remember Mr. Show?
Yeah.
And remember David Cross did that sketch?
Yeah, I do wonder what's wrong with him. They never really talk about it.
I honestly think he could walk.
Well, he talks about he used to go to the swimming hole at his grandfather's place. So you'd think when he was a kid at least, he was walking, it sounds like, and swimming and stuff. But I don't know.
I was thinking of Mr. Show because remember David Cross played this character of like this guy just chooses to be in a wheelchair. He just chooses to be. He's just so lazy and so pathetic that he just lives in a wheelchair. A lot of streamers pretend to be in wheelchairs so they can make money. I mean, it's like a common scam.
And I have to note, of course, that the chainsaw used in the film was a Poulan 245A.
Oh,
and they had,
wow.
And the big stripe you see is just a big piece of black tape covering the Poulan logo.
Okay, makes sense.
To avoid lawsuits.
I also noticed that previous shot from this, we got a male butt shot. The same type of shot where the camera is tracking along behind, but now it's a male's derriere.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like this,
all's fair.
This film, it's, like obviously these are young people trying to hang out and, implying that there's going to be some fooling around. But it's not heavy on the sex theme at all. And I think that was part of Tobe Hooper really trying to get that PG rating he was hoping for. But also, it wasn't part of, I think, the fabric yet of all horror movies.
The culture of that slasher era and horror in general. Yeah, that came a little bit later. But it's funny. He really sort of leans into it full bore in Texas Chainsaw 2.
Yeah,
the sexuality becomes comical because he leans much further into it. It just changes the tone.
It's 10 years later. He has to now compete with the current movies that are out there, which are the Friday the 13th now, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and those guys are doing the sex thing. So you can see why it pops out later, but.
I will
there's
say,
the sun again, walking into the sun.
Gorgeous shot, but again, the sun. I will say right from the jump, and I'm not afraid to say it, and I'm not going to hide from it, right from episode 1 of season 4. My favorite film of the entire franchise is, as much as I love this one, it's not this one, it's actually part 2. That is my all-time favorite, so I'm looking forward to talking about that next time.
I don't know yet which one's my favorite.
You're fired.
But you see, like, this film teeters on, also, it's kind of like that weird personality of the cook, where we're in that other house, and the camera's handheld, very amateur-y, sort of rocky, and then you get also these beautiful tracking shots at times, out here where we're going down with the dolly.
Look at that shot real quick. Isn't that interesting? Like the composition with the dirty screen, the trees moving behind him.
The light, the way the shadow. It's the shadow.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Again, and it's back to that point of they didn't have, lights. They had like 9 lights altogether. But if it was during the day, they pretty much shot with available lighting.
I mean, the available lighting is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, filming when they were filming is the sun looks beautiful.
Well, it's probably part also of why the sun seems like such a like another character almost in this film, because it's like they needed it to film. Like it has to be there during the day for them to have enough light to do stuff. You know,
makes total sense. It's so funny, going back to what you were saying earlier. You're so right, though. The idea that people just walk into people's houses, does that ever happen in real life? I mean, that is...
I don't know. Maybe
I've never
back
done
then,
that once.
I don't know.
You know what I did
when
do?
You're not in dire trouble
quick,
here, but...
You know what happened to me the other day? When you get into the wrong car in a parking lot, I was with my dad, got coffee, got into the wrong... I opened the door of the wrong car. But I didn't go in.
This is great. So this is a great example. When you watch this guy's face, as soon as he sees Leatherface, that is pure fear, because he had never seen Gunner yet as Leatherface,
and he's passed through that hellmouth.
They stayed away from him, and so this actor,
this is so frightening,
was supposed to the first time they did it, he was supposed to, I don't know, fall down or something, but he got so scared he ran away. That's creepy too.
Oh, God.
Yeah, right there. See, do you see how scared he was there? That was real. That was because the actor didn't know what was going to come out at him.
Going back to Romero, this scene reminds me so much.
Right here.
Go ahead.
This is really important, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Leatherface freaking out, and you can hear, the sounds he's making, that childlike sounds. He was also told to hit that chicken cage on the way by to make it lively.
Rattle it, yeah.
We've seen, but look at him. He's freaking out. Where are these people coming from?
Yeah.
Like he's not out to kill people.
I read
This is just they're coming in his world.
In one of the pieces I read, somebody was saying, in a way, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a home invasion movie.
Yeah.
It's just a home invasion movie from the perspective of the killers.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know where all these people are coming. Where
he doesn't want him to be there.
Coming from?
He's stressed out right now.
Yeah. Well,
he doesn't want this.
He doesn't like getting in trouble, and he's assuming he's going to get himself into trouble here.
Yeah.
So he's trying to make sense of his surroundings with what limited faculties he has.
And probably are there more coming?
It seems endless to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back to the moon.
Yeah. And that's it. That's the end of the day until we get to the dawn at the end. And they would, again, because of their lack of lighting and stuff, all the headlights you see in cars and the trucks, they had to rig them all up with their own much brighter lights, so that they would read on this film.
I was going to say, because you were mentioning earlier that you would have to use a lot of light to get the celluloid to react. And yet a lot of these scenes are really saturated in darkness, so it must have been extremely stressful.
Yeah.
Because back then you wouldn't even know. You'd have to shoot and then send it out. So you'd have to hope you got it.
There's a great thing, Daniel Pearl, the cinematographer, talks about how, back then, you didn't have all these other ways to instantly rewatch your takes.
God, no.
And because of the way they were doing this, they made this movie in 4 weeks, no money, so there weren't daily sessions. They weren't going out and watch. So Daniel Pearl talked about how really he was the only one until Hooper started editing, or sitting with his editors. He was the only one who saw the movie.
Right.
He was the only one who got to look through the lens and see what they were capturing and everything. And think about that. Only one. That's, as a director, God, it must be tough to just trust that everything is coming out okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you and I both know, back in our days, we did some short film stuff shooting on film. Yeah. And you would spend days shooting, and then you'd have to send the film canisters off to be developed, thinking, I hope that we don't have to do all this again.
Exactly.
And sometimes you would find out there was nothing on the film, or it was underexposed.
Yeah. And I know at one point
how did anybody do anything on film?
They had a bad lens, and they didn't know till they developed it, so they had to go reshoot some stuff because of it.
And that means you have to get the actors back again. Yeah. You've got to get them to redo something.
Yeah. You have to make it match and all that stuff, And I think there's a nod to Franklin. Is it part 2 with the tunnels?
Yeah, the
And
labyrinth.
I think you see like a wheelchair with a skeleton
do.
in it,
Yep.
and the flashlight and the whole thing.
Yep. Lefty finds it.
Like they went back and
He's like,
took this out of the woods.
Franklin.
Oh, he says it. He calls him Franklin?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I haven't watched the
can't
sequel
remember.
in a while. I'm going
Yeah.
to catch up on it for this next
Yeah.
episode. But I'm pretty sure that he's down in those tunnels in what I see as a labyrinth,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Because in a mythological sense, clearly I see Leatherface as the Minotaur. Clearly. Just looking at mythologically. I would argue the interior of the house in this first movie is also kind of labyrinthine in the way it's settled. Although I see it more in line of being a monster itself with a mouth and all of that.
Fun fact about the house
Fun
is
fact.
it still exists. It's been like restored. I think it's like a restaurant.
And they, like, moved
They
it.
moved it.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
that's
had to. They carefully, took it down and rebuilt it elsewhere, not too far. But I thought that was interesting. So the spot where they actually filmed it, where the house originally was, is just a field right now.
And you know what that just reminded me of? When we visited the, was it the Myers house out in Pasadena?
Yeah,
Remember
they
had
moved that too.
house too.
Yeah, that is
Didn't
weird. They did.
Am I
yes.
crazy?
No, you're not.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, okay, there you go. It's weird. Just
yeah.
occurred to me
Yeah.
because we went and walked over there and took a look at that. Was really interesting
Now-
seeing that house.
Something very effective Hooper does with a lot of the shocking moments of this film, especially coming up here when Franklin gets it. He did this trick where he would always cut about 4 frames out of the moment, almost too early. Makes it a little more unsettling.
Like a little jarring.
Yeah.
You know, now that you're saying that, I sense that. Yeah, you're absolutely. Well, there's a lot of like in the sound and in the way the visuals and the sound intermix that's just discordant and dissonant, like off. Like the sound will be a little slight tiny bit off of where it should be, and so it gives you an uncomfortable feeling on top of whatever's horribly being presented to you. He's really masterful, Tobe Hooper. Like he's
a really smart filmmaker.
his directorial voice from early on like this was so assured. His voice as a storyteller was clearly so assured so early on. In going through his films in the preceding years, so much diversity and eccentricity in his stories that he chose to tell. Really a fascinating filmmaker.
Yeah.
Talk about iconic.
And
right
here's
there.
like the only big kill.
And it happens like that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It just
Yeah.
he pops, he like spawns out of nowhere and jabs him. And he is jabbing him. And again, you're seeing that what I would call the last twitch of the death nerve, to
Yeah.
quote another Italian
Yeah.
title. That's sort of what, and I think I might have misquoted that title, but paraphrasing.
Gunnar was always talking about how slow Marilyn Burns was here running, and that he would, when you see him, if you look at him in the background, he's often just making up things to do to that so he wouldn't catch her, like where will stop and just start cutting branches away in front of him, like, or do other things. It was just like this. Like, it was just really weird how slow she
And
was.
what's effective is you can see the branches being shredded apart.
Yeah.
So what it tells you in your mind is, oh shit, that's a real chainsaw.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
Something about this reminds me of Evil Dead as well.
oh well, I think
Don't you kind of
Evil
see
Dead
Evil
definitely
Dead
took from this.
maybe
Yeah,
borrowing a bit from
yes,
this?
yes,
Yeah.
the dark humor, the
and
gore.
moving through the woods.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
This
yeah.
loud sound chasing you through the woods.
Tobe Hooper asked Gunnar Hansen. He goes, "I need to borrow your boots." And then he gave them back to him with 3-inch heels on them. And so at first Gunnar said he was always banging his head on the door frames in the house, and one time like knocked himself out.
Yeah, there you go.
But he had to really learn to run and then, get through door frames with those 3-inch heels on.
Again, going back to the sound design here, keeping that chainsaw just running and running,
Yeah.
and it becomes an oppressive, almost annoying sound.
Yeah.
And I try to imagine being in like a movie theater where people are uneasy and
Screaming
It had
and
to just
chainsaws,
feel
yeah.
dizzying watching this movie.
I should point out too, Marilyn Burns, like she got beat up making this movie, and like when she was running through all that, she got really caught up by all the branches, and a lot of the blood that ends up on that sweater by the end is real.
Well,
and
there's a
it
point
was
where
like,
they really cut her.
well, yeah, that happens later too, but the shirt was like stiff with blood, they said, by the end of it, because she was, they
she's got to be one of the greatest screamers in movie history, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
And we've seen
one of the
a lot
early,
of them in the last 4 years.
Again, it's not easy to just run around and scream for hours and hours and hours and hours, right?
I mean, she was literally blowing out blood vessels in her eyes from just incessant screaming.
And of course, they put a fake door on the house for Gunnar to actually,
and he's going to be in so much trouble.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Why didn't he just turn the handle?
Kick it, something, right? No, but because the chainsaw is his...
He goes like total Jack Torrance on that door. He goes Kool-Aid Man.
And are we just supposed to assume that that's the grandmother's mummy sitting there up there with Grandpa, 100%,
right? Of course, yeah, they're in the same room.
The Psycho.
And clearly an allusion to Psycho. There's no doubt about it. And that must have been their little dog, their little chihuahua. That'll be Walter
that
someday.
Sound, even though it's not necessarily musical instruments, it's almost Psycho-ish. That high pitched like cheat, cheat. Yeah,
it is Psycho-ish.
Right. Yeah.
Even the way we were just mimicking the sound was like almost like Psycho. Oh my God.
Did you notice how he gets, like, Leatherface almost gets startled? So, this is a funny story. They hire a stunt woman to do the jump, right? But he still wanted her fall right there to look realistic, so she still, like, fell from, like, 4 feet up and, like, kind of banged herself up there. So they were like, the stunt woman had a short little fall onto a mattress, but she had to actually hit the ground,
Yeah, oh yeah.
So she took it like a champ.
I mean, it looked pretty damn realistic to me.
Yeah.
It didn't look like it was a stunt. It looked real. Like, I would say, like, and I've noticed that a few times during watching this movie just now, anytime there's any physicality, I'm assuming it must be real. That's why Paul Partain is so ripped to shreds.
Besides, I think going out the window, most of these stunts are the people, themselves doing everything.
Look, even if you have to break through that candy glass in balsa wood, it's still somewhat got to be uncomfortable or painful.
It's also interesting or a fun fact to note that originally in the script, Leatherface's lines were a little more, it was gibberish, but it was a little more planned out, and Tobe would tell Gunnar each time, like, what it meant, what he needed to convey. But then they didn't really like it as he was, doing it. And so they, just took it all away, said, "You know what, never mind, forget that." And the only time you actually hear Leatherface's actual, like, him trying to talk is, when the older brother comes home to cook, and he's sort of like, "Look what you done to the door," and all this stuff. And you see him in the kitchen and he's doing that high-pitched whimpering, but it's almost like what was the Muppet with the Mr. Beak, the making the sounds.
Beaker.
Beaker. It's like, he's just making these high-pitched, like,
you're
sounds almost.
Right. That's so funny.
And he's like pointing at things,
it's his childlike
That's how he
persona.
talks. That's the closest you'll get to, like, whatever is under Leatherface's mask, the person. That's his voice,
I mean, if you look at the way Leatherface has meticulously molded the mouth of his killer mask or his child mask, it's done in a smile.
Yeah.
It's an open mouth smile. It's something I never noticed until this month, but I'm telling you, and you see the wiring that he uses
like a kid,
to create it. I think he's making his face smile.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Originally, when they filmed this outside the gas station, they did it with Leatherface was doing the dance that he does at the end. He does it outside. He did it outside here, but they decided to cut it, so it was a little more questionable whether or not Leatherface was actually out there. Because when they held on him doing the dance, it was like, all right, he's there,
Yeah.
And now you're like, but look, he's like literally putting her up next to the meat, up against a butcher block. It's all that.
I mean, leaning her against that butcher block is so. It's like.
And there's a hook. If you look over to the left, there's a meat hook right there,
Mm-hmm. In the actual horrific, again, like, deeply suggestive imagery of that oven.
Yeah, the red,
color,
the meat, the glowing like red, and her slowly putting it together, like.
Oh my God! In the smoke going up out of the door.
And I think, there's another one of these apocalyptic radio broadcasts.
Apocalyptic. Yes, it's so apocalyptic. The oven almost looks primitive.
Yeah.
It almost looks like the oven like cave people would have used.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the way the meat is hanging and it's just and juxtaposed with what the guy on the radio is
Right,
saying.
exactly.
And she's putting to it's so
Yeah.
it's look at
And
look
this,
at
the
tell me that's
sizzling,
not meant
hearing
to
the
look like hell.
sizzling. Yeah, of course.
It's demonic.
Yeah,
Like
of
it
course.
is demonic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's very frightening to me. It's like literally the type of imagery that is out of the communal nightmares of every human being. This is the type of stuff of nightmares, truly. Again, it's so interesting the way Romero and Hooper use media the same type of way, almost as a weapon on the audience. It's not just a way to bring information, it's the frequency of the information on the radio. Like you use that term apocalyptic. It's apocalyptic.
Yeah.
It's frightening.
This film was banned in a lot of countries. Germany, it was like forbidden.
I think England was like 20 years.
It has it's amazing.
Australia, 10 years.
Yeah. There's the themes in this and everything else, it's I think way more disturbing to other cultures than American. It's like you almost needed to grow up here to be less freaked out by it, to understand sort of, I mean,
there's a lot of similarity in the earlier work of Tobe Hooper to the later work of Sam Peckinpah.
Yeah.
The sort of de-glorification of violence.
Yeah.
It brings something out in the depiction of violence that's even more disturbing in a way. The realism, the characterization of violence. Yeah. It's if you look at like Straw Dogs or a movie like that, it's so Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. That's another good example of this. There's a raw, visceral sense of violence that is understandable and therefore is twice as disturbing, like in Last House on the Left. The type of evil that intersects with normal American life, that you can find down, you take one wrong turn, and you're in hell. You're in Dante's Inferno.
When he's driving with her here in a minute in the truck, that is, in a weird way, it's one of the more disturbing scenes to me. The fact that he's doing this, like, now, it's going to be okay. You'll see.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just starts whacking her with the stick with his devilish grin. And he does it like 3 or 4 times. It's that he's just teetering between these like personalities or these
the greatest
moralities, I should say.
Like a psychopathic sociopath, someone who is a combination of those things, which obviously I think, Drayton is. What they become incredible at is they become emotional mimics. They know precisely how to mimic human emotion, but it's used as a lure or as a manipulation tactic. It's not used in the genuine or it's an artifice for someone in that type of a mindset.
Yes.
So that vacillation, there it is again, between him pretending to be empathetic and actually being a crazed maniac.
Yeah, even like right here, like him remembering, I got to shut off the lights. It's that riding the line of normalcy.
That's that patriarch side of it. Exactly what he would have yelled if Leatherface had left the light on. He'd be he'd be in trouble for it.
Got to follow the rules.
He's also a cheapskate. And you see a lot more of that in the sequel. Yeah. You see a lot more of Drayton's personality in part 2 and a lot more of that shrewdness that he has that comes right out of Jim Sydow.
He was like a Shakespearean actor. Yeah.
Apparently he was well known for having portrayed a very brilliant version of King Lear. That in his regional, back in those days, like theater was very much a regional thing.
Yeah.
And there were like theater stars of different regions, and he was a very acclaimed regional actor.
Yep.
I mean, Shakespearean acting, theatrical acting is like an obsession for some actors, just doing specifically that.
Like I was mentioning earlier, there was a lot of other films around this time that did the like presenting true story.
Oh yeah, Cannibal
films,
Holocaust,
Legend of Boggy Creek, Walking Tall, Macon County Line, Jackson County Jail, The Town That Dreaded Sundown,
and then later got Blair Witch.
Yes. Oh yeah, I mean Blair Witch. There's a lot of people that you can see the, the extreme close up of from Blair Witch, the famous shot of the girl with the eyes. And you look at some of the close-ups that are going to be on Sally during the dinner scene. It's the same thing.
That verite approach that is all through Blair Witch absolutely shares genetic connections to this film. It's just impossible not to see that for sure. But I think about that movie, Deodato's film. I think it's called Cannibal Holocaust mostly. That people actually were so convinced was real that the director had to be brought up on murder charges. They had to bring the actors to show the investigators that they were not murdered in order to clear his name.
I think that's one of the most beautiful
absolutely
shots right there.
It looks like something out of
lights. And
the Grapes of Wrath or something.
And back to Jim Siedow, did you know that Tobe Hooper, he had directed an episode of Amazing Stories, and he used Jim Siedow in his episode?
I did not remember that.
I want to go look it up and watch it because, I'm sure I saw it back in the day, but...
Wow, I loved Remember Amazing Stories?
That was a great
I absolutely loved the opening credits for Amazing Stories. And remember the one where the World War II and it was a cartoon plane?
Yeah,
it was like Roger
Mark
Rabbit.
Hamill.
Yeah, and Kevin Costner too.
So, it's sort of that Spielberg
I love that show.
Relationship with
now I want to go watch those episodes.
Hooper, yeah.
Amazing Stories. I haven't thought about that in a long time. Of course, what was the... Hold on, I got to look it up.
He's just so over the top. It's so beautiful. It's like from here on in, it's sort of like audible chaos. There's screaming. There's the yelling by the cook. You get Leatherface. They're all just like on their own wavelength, and there's just so much noise.
Oh my god!
Oh, look, I love it.
And almost like
now he's got the apron and the other face on.
You know, it's like almost like a haunted house attraction, like a spook house. People are just popping out of every door.
This is where you hear Leatherface's sort of voice when they're in the kitchen right here. And I love the hitchhiker's face too when he realizes who the girl is. That's the girl from the van earlier, right here.
Yes, that's awesome. That realization.
And of course, she's in the armchair.
I know you. Oh my god! And I love that in the sequel, Chop Top is his brother that was over in Vietnam at the time during this movie. Yeah. That is so awesome. I love when that type of connection. That's great.
I love that.
Sound like Mickey Mouse, like a demented Mickey Mouse. Even though Mickey Mouse is fairly demented in and of himself. God bless him. And,
it's like Gunnar Hansen always joked, like, you took away my one chance at a line when they changed how Leatherface was going to communicate.
That's funny. You know what is a really, really creepy and awesome Tobe Hooper movie is Invaders from Mars.
Oh, right.
Do you remember that version of Invaders from Mars? That movie is very nightmarish in a way. And I have to catch up with that again. I haven't seen it in many years, but the imagery of it is so nightmarish.
I guess there was a movie called Head Cheese, came out in 2002. I don't know it. Do you know it?
I do not know that.
And it used many of this film's original locations.
Is it somehow connected to these films in its own, like in a fan fiction way or something?
I don't. There's obviously a connection to some sort, but I don't know what kind, to tell you the truth. There was a short film.
For our listeners in the future, we're recording this in February of 2026, and only recently. There's been like the revelation of this film called All American Massacre or All American Chainsaw Massacre. It was sort of an aborted Chainsaw sequel with the Chop Top character, and I don't know if they have the full film that's going to be restored and released or just segments of it. But it's kind of interesting developing. There's a lot of stuff going on with Texas Chainsaw Massacre right now in culture. It's sort of having a resurgence.
Yeah. Yep. And so this begins the 27-hour-long shoot.
And boy, can you see it.
And Gunnar, he said like he only had one version of his outfit, and that shirt he's wearing was tea stained to get the color. So production never wanted to wash it. So it smelled horribly by this day. He said literally that no one else would sit near him at lunch. He just reeked because they wouldn't wash his shirt.
I can imagine.
And he was wearing it all day, every day,
Yeah.
sweating in it and everything else.
Now, here is, again, where there are so many vampire motifs. First off, it's almost like the blood brings their grandfather to animated life.
Yeah,
Don't you notice that?
Yeah.
And it goes back to these cutting and blood ritual type things.
Yeah.
I think Tobe Hooper sort of was looking at this film almost like a pastiche of a lot of different tropes. He was throwing all different kind of mythological ideas and tropes at, and just seeing what would stick. But the vampirism thing is all through this film, especially in this scene, which is really centered around blood, especially considering they use real blood.
Yeah. Well, they didn't mean to.
Yeah, but it ended up being that way.
The actor playing the grandfather is only 20 years old.
No way.
Yeah.
John Dugan.
John Dugan.
Name, yeah.
He was 20 years old playing so the grandfather is supposed to be 108 years old, I believe.
But see how he's completely still, like you would think
Yeah.
she's looking at
Yeah.
a corpse.
Yeah.
Because the body of his wife, you would presume, was dead, is clearly dead.
Yeah.
Desiccated.
So yeah, there's the cut. Apparently it was taken so many takes to get,
Yeah.
and Gunnar was so out of his head and he just wanted to move on that he literally just
Jabbed her.
actually cut her for real, and she got pretty mad at him for it.
Yeah.
But he said like everyone was so out of their head and there was so much going on that like
Now see how he's
no one
animating to
took
life?
notice. Yeah, of
From the
course.
blood.
Yeah, and the actor was also like he was the brother-in-law of maybe Daniel Pearl, somebody else in the production, basically just asked to come do this. So you can see why it was so easy for him to be like, you know what? I'm not doing this again. Get what
So-
you can get with this makeup on now. And they even dragged him outside. There's the famous photo of the family outside. That was done as a lark. It was never supposed to get out. A German reporter who was visiting took it from the set and it ended up becoming used in all sorts of the weird German bootleggy versions and everything else, But that photo was never supposed to actually see the light of day.
Oh, wow.
In the beginning with the whole family together outside.
I've got a weird little fun fact. It goes back to the beginning of the movie, but it's there again. The armadillo that you see a couple times in this movie, do you know that apparently it connects back to an armadillo that's in Todd Browning's 1931 Dracula? Now, why would there have been an armadillo somewhere in that movie? It's set in Transylvania, but apparently there is an armadillo somewhere in that movie that stands out.
It wasn't supposed to be an armadillo in this movie. They were going to use a dead dog, right?
Maybe I'm having a fever dream.
And then Tobe Hooper kind of realized you can't do that, right? People don't want to see it. So they're two human dogs, right? They can't show a dead dog. So Bob Burns found this dead armadillo on the road there. They shot it, but then he took it.
Which is much more Texas or Southwest.
He said, like, you guys can use this, but you can't mess it up. It was like this armadillo was like a big deal. There was some sort of a moment that happened between Hooper and this and Bob Burns over this armadillo, because they always make these jokes about Bob Burns' dear armadillo. And then at the end, he took it and like taxidermied it. And I think he still has it. A lot of the bones and the stuff that Bob Burns had on this show up again in some of his other films that he was doing, and I'm totally blanking on. It was something big. I've got to
be in there somewhere in this novel of notes.
I know. I'll get there.
Joe's got like 13 pages of notes.
Yeah.
This was a lot. This is the most notes I've ever had for one of our episodes. As a matter of fact, when I got here to record, I felt completely like overwhelmed. I was saying to Joe, I was having trouble kind of synthesizing all my notes to get ready to record. I still feel like I'm not doing an excellent job of bringing across everything that I ingested over the last month. I've read, there's another writer named Stephanie Monahan who writes a lot about this movie in a really beautiful way. You can find some of her articles online as well if you want to dig a little deeper. This scene is just absolutely depraved. And I can imagine for an audience seeing this like for the first time back in 1974, it must have been, you must have felt sick to your stomach when you left the screening of this film. It's so disturbing, even all these 50 years later. Look at those close-ups,
yeah.
Look at those eyes.
Yeah.
Brutal. She absolutely looks truly demented. It looks beyond acting. It's true. They're all demented. It looks true.
Bob Burns also doubled as the casting director on this movie. I think there was a lot of that going on this type of thing.
He went on to work, do a couple collaborations with Stuart Gordon. He worked on like Reanimator and From Beyond, I think, as well. I mean, his work as a production designer here it's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And according to Ridley Scott, this is the movie that inspired him to make Alien. People have often called Alien a Texas Chainsaw in space.
Yeah, I kind of see that. And it's interesting to me that terms of production design, look at how many horror films were inspired by Chainsaw's aesthetic and how many sci-fi films inspired by the Alien aesthetic. And yet these somehow films are connected. Well, like Star Wars, like Alien in and of itself, this is one of these films, Chainsaw, that has inspired so many other filmmakers to kind of jump in and create.
According to the news reporter in the radio, they're in Muerto County, and Muerto, of course, means dead in Spanish.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yep, it's fictional.
There was something about Newt, Texas, Newt.
Okay.
It might have been a location they filmed one of these, but I thought that was the strangest town name, Newt, which is an Alien reference now that I think about it.
Oh, Bob Burns reused the bones and stuff in Hills Have Eyes.
Oh, okay. Another film that kind of falls in that Last House on the Left kind of zone.
Yes.
And both of those are Wes Craven.
Yeah, that's true.
You can just see these people were frickin' exhausted. My old grandpa's the best killer that ever was.
I mean, the crew was actually getting sick by the smell.
Yeah. It was almost toxic in the fumes.
They had 2 plates of the head cheese, one in the other room that was cooler by...
What is head cheese? Do you know?
They make it in the skull of like a cow, like I think it's all the stuff in there.
All that
stuff?
I
think it's all that stuff boiled up and turned into cheese.
Yeah,
but
probably smear it on bread. Oh my! God, it's making me nauseous.
It's gross.
I may become a vegetarian now. I don't actually eat all that much meat.
There's the other theme of the effects of the modernization within the industry. This family worked in the slaughterhouse at one point legitimately, but then their jobs got taken out by machines and
and it goes back to that imagery of the stopwatch with the spike going through it. When you lose your job, when you lose your connection to society, you feel displaced from time. And this family is completely displaced from their own reality. That's why they can act with such impunity, because they're not existing in the same kind of wavelength as anything else going on around them in the world. They're in their own irresolute reality because they've been disconnected from the mainstream. They've been literally unplugged.
The chaos in this scene, the anticipation,
it's pure chaos.
Watch him try over and over to kill her, and she gets a couple good whacks.
Any of those would be extremely painful.
Oh, Jesus. Well, yeah, she starts bleeding pretty good.
And see, look at how much more of her back is now also being exposed.
Is a small detail. If you look at all of the faces that Leatherface wears, there's a stitch on the forehead, because that's the point where they get hit with the hammer.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Because that's how they all get taken out.
Yeah, that's right. Right through the window.
That camera shot I love. And this is actually, I know this is all supposed to be
the way the camera moves right there is so awesome. So awesome.
All this blood, and it's the beginning. Is this the birth of the girl in a way? Were there other movies?
That could be. She emerges into this quiet, peaceful, passive, sterilizing. Another day has emerged.
Yeah, outside again.
It's quiet. Other people are probably other farmers just waking up.
Love it.
And these types of sounds in a farming area probably wouldn't even stand out. The sounds of saws.
Look at this wide shot. There's nobody
there's nothing
around.
around. Yeah,
Who's
absolutely. They're able to literally...
Maybe if she gets to the road, which, she does, she gets someone's attention, but...
But you're left to wonder
Look at, he's cutting her the whole time, slicing her. Look
razor,
at that.
Yeah. You're really left to wonder if, in and of itself, the driver that picks her up isn't just going to drive her right back into the hellmouth.
And this was done in reverse. That shot from inside the cab where you see him going at the hitchhiker was actually done in reverse.
Okay, really, really quick.
And then played backwards. Yeah.
I got a quick fun fact. Do you notice what says on the side of the truck?
Yeah, Black Maria. Edison's.
That was Thomas Edison's film company. And a lot of people have wondered why Tobe Hooper would have chosen that. And then the fact that
they're not even sure
is stabbing it with the chainsaw.
Well, there's some doubt as to whether that was actually put there by them or just happened to be on that truck. Believe it or not.
Interesting. Really?
Believe it or not. It's not a... It
seems like it's too clear of a reference.
That's what everyone says, but some of the interviews I saw and stuff, it was always in this coincidental, like come on, but no one knows that he did for sure, And right here, Gunner had a metal plate under his leg, with the fake
just
meat.
Some fake viscera
but
there,
it got so heated up from the saw, he was convinced it went through and they had got his leg. But he just got a little bit of a burn there. And this is, even though it's supposed to be sunrise morning, it's actually sunset.
You can kind of see, I read that. Yeah. You can kind of see it. Once you hear that, you can sort of see that. But it works. It works perfectly.
Yeah.
I would have just kept on running with the black guy. He's actually getting away.
Yeah.
Like, why even jump in this car? I wonder what happened to that poor, portly black man. Did he just keep running up the road to freedom?
I don't know, but the Sawyer family just gained a truck.
Yeah. And you have shot after shot that is just purely iconic. Her in the back of the truck driving off, and of course this. That's been parodied,
and it hasn't even
recreated.
It wasn't even really that rehearsed.
Times.
He sort of did it. Daniel Pearl just kind of tried to get it, and it cuts right on the frame when the saw gets really close, and the whole crew is convinced that Pearl had gotten hit.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. Because it was coming right at the camera, And wow, beautiful. There we go.
Beautiful.
Oh my God.
It's funny.
I don't know if I got through everything. There's so much to say about this movie.
Even though it's only like 83 minutes long, it didn't feel shorter than other movies we've covered. Did you feel that way?
No, because I also think by the time you're getting to that final scene and things are so, you're like let's get this over with,
Yeah.
The anticipation or how much worse is it going to get, and you're kind of relieved when it's over. You're not necessarily disappointed or anything,
Wow, this has been an absolute blast. It's so... I feel so happy to be getting back down to business here at Haddonfield Radio, jumping in on a brand new season, a brand new franchise. With Texas Chainsaw, we have 9 movies to cover, so that will be 9 new episodes of Haddonfield Radio coming during 2026 for our listeners in the present. If you're one of our listeners in the future, I guess you can just go to the next episode or the one after that. But for Joe and I, we're trapped here in February of 2026. Finishing up recording this episode, and I don't know about you, but I've had a blast.
This was fun. We're back, baby. It's good.
I will say, I feel like there's so much more I could have said.
I know. There's a lot. It's one of those movies that there's a wonderful story to its making.
So many more different takes and analysis.
So many rabbit holes you can go down in terms of meanings and influences. And,
well, what I was going to... Why was going to bring that up, I just wanted to suggest, and something I would ask of you guys listening, anything that we've missed or anything that you guys want to, that deserves to be added to the conversation, please, please, please throw it in the comments section. Mm-hmm. Any fun facts of your own, anything that we didn't get to. Sometimes Joe and I specifically leave some things out in hopes that you guys will bring them into the comments section. So please, if there's something that you want to add to the conversation, please, we read and try to respond to it we definitely read them all. Mm-hmm. And so throw some stuff that we might have missed, because this movie is chock full of legacy, chock full of history, and certainly chock full of lore, for sure.
Yeah, we could talk days and days about it.
And the entire franchise going forward this season, Joe and I are absolutely committed to trying to bring a lot of new ideas and some new perspectives and some new thinking to these movies, and try to bring some fresh perspective.
Yeah, not the same old conversations you always had.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be trying to do this season, and hopefully you guys are going to be along for the ride. I guarantee you, I'm aiming to make this the greatest of all Haddonfield Radio seasons. I'm super excited because this period of history that Texas Chainsaw sort of represents is just utterly fascinating. All the culture that came out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its sequels is utterly fascinating. So, we'll be talking about all of it.
Yep.
So, anything else?
No, I'm. Thank you, everyone, for coming on this ride with us.
Yeah.
This is fun.
It's so, it just makes me feel so happy to be back here in Joe's basement in front of the microphones with the headphones on, with you guys watching these movies that we all love. And it's going to be a lot of fun this season. And I really, really, really hope you'll come along for the ride because we love you and appreciate you more than you will ever know. So, we've held you here long enough. Next time we will be back, of course, with episode 36, amazingly enough,
wow.
Which will be, again, Tobe Hooper's, I forget which year this was.
I think it was about 10 years later.
So let's say 1986. I think it might 85 or 86. 84.
Well,
let's look it up while we're right here.
And I should also point out that, just like last season, we're going to be putting up episodes on the 13th of every month.
Yep, we're going to just continue doing that.
It seems appropriate, a little nod to... It was
1986.
Okay, okay.
So next time, episode 36, we'll be talking about Tobe Hooper's 1986 sequel. Very divisive, very controversial
Dennis
sequel.
Hopper, right?
What I think is one of his greatest performances. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Left the end right.
If you like the unhinged Dennis Hopper performances, yes.
Is there a different kind of Dennis Hopper performance?
I guess. There's different levels of unhinged.
I guess that's true.
It was great revisiting that
Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. You could not make a more different film. Sometimes it's almost impossible for me to get my head around the fact that it's the same director.
Right.
Because stylistically, but then again, in a way, I think the sequel makes complete sense for the decade where it was made, just as much sense as Texas Chainsaw 1974 makes in the decade it was made, right?
Yeah.
And we'll dive into that when we get there, but that'll be next up. So, and if you haven't had a chance to, we like I mentioned earlier, we just recently released the history, legacy, and lore of John Carpenter's Vampires, our collaboration with iconic actor, storyteller, musician, and just wonderful person, James Woods. So if you haven't had a chance, it's our longest episode of all time so far. And
there'll be other bonus episodes like that throughout the season at times where we'll be doing some other one-offs. So
absolutely. We've definitely got some surprises in store for 2026 and beyond. So let's just dig in all together down here in Joe's basement, and we'll start journeying through the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. But until next time, I just want to say we love you. We appreciate you. Mom, I love you. Wally, I'll be seeing you soon. And we could not do this without you. It would never be the same without you. So wherever you are in the world, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in Canada, England, Australia, New Zealand, or any one of the other 37 countries where we have listeners, we love you with all of our heart, and we appreciate you more than you will ever know.
Geez, I hope Texas Chainsaw isn't banned in some of these countries still.
You may be missing out on not only this episode, but all of the episodes this season. No, we'll be all right. We'll find a way.
We love you guys.
We love you. We'll see you next time for Texas Chainsaw 2. I guess anything else?
No, you eat what you kill.
That's it. Perfect. And you know what? The Saw is family. Don't ever forget that. So my name, as always, has been Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francasio.
And you have a very happy Halloween.